So, I really want to note this right here. You are all going to get a flash drive packed full of economics and personal finance lessons. It's called Virtual Economics 4.5. And there's a book that's on virtual economics called Focus, Economics in Middle School World History. Now, I know what's probably going to jump out to you here is that, hold on, I teach this in 9th and 10th grade. And for some reason, they aimed it at middle grades. But if your students are anything like my students, middle school is a perfectly good level to aim at when going for 9th graders or 10th graders. When I would use this resource, if I had to print things out, I would just white out the middle school part at the bottom so that handouts so that my students didn't get insulted. But aside from that, the lesson plans work great for this age level. I'm going to show you how to use your virtual economics all in good time, so you're able to see all the neat lessons from this book. The one thing that's a characteristic of the book is that it's packed full of lessons with simulations, so sort of active learning activities where the students are getting up and moving around and trading stuff. So we're going to start out soon with the economic way of thinking. And economics is a way to think conceptually about how people make choices. And I know that sounds like a simple statement, but when you can really dig into the significance of what it means to think conceptually about how people make choices, you can see the importance of this for thinking about all things, right? Economics is not a historical method where you analyze documents, where you analyze what people did and try to parse out cause and effect. That's a historical method. Economics is a way that we start out by saying, hey, people respond to incentives. Now let's analyze people's incentives and use that as to give insight into what people did. And so kind of when you use an economic way of thinking, you try to actually see through the initial what people did and look for sort of the forces that underlie their choice-making incentives underneath. And you can do that in anything. And today we're going to do it in world history. So after that, I'm going to demo some lessons, not entire lessons. We're going to do sort of an activity from each of these lessons. So we're going to do the Neolithic agricultural revolution. This is why I asked you to have scissors and paper available. If you don't have scissors and paper available, that's okay, because there's an entire group of people in this activity who are not supposed to have scissors, but you do need paper, who don't have scissors. So if you don't have scissors, that's okay. We'll take a break. I'm already thinking that we're going to need to change the agenda a little, because I think the economic way of thinking is going to go longer than I originally thought. So that's going to be okay. These lessons might be compressed a little bit. We'll learn about Mansa Musa, the man from Mecca, and his trip from Mali to Mecca, and the effect that he had on the gold market in Egypt. We're going to learn about how guilds affected business in the Middle Ages. We're going to look at the age of exploration and what's the big deal about spices. We're going to have lunch at our houses, obviously, because we're virtual, before Twyla Kitts from the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts comes to do some activities with us about with the materials that they have at the VMFA. Interestingly, I've done a workshop entitled Economics and the Arts, which I did in cooperation with the Virginia History Museum. And I'm doing Economics and World History in cooperation with the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. And that seems backwards, but it works, because if you've been to VMFA, they have amazing section of ancient things dragged up from the bottom of the ocean that are germane to world history. And they have amazing educational resources. So she's going to be sharing with us in the afternoon. At 2:40, I'm going to show you how to access your virtual economics flash drive and how to use it for lesson planning. We'll mop up with an activity on kind of a world geography activity /history/econ, which really kind of ties up all the concepts that we're going to be learning. By 3:45, we will sign off. Let me do the entire week actually first before we do questions, because what we do the asynchronous days and the field trip is going to have an effect on things. Let me pull up the Google Classroom. All right, here it is. Okay, so one thing that's going to be handy is that all the resources that we do in the class, you can just access right here. So if you need to open the PDF for things, which you will, then you can just put them right here on the, then you can just look here in the Google Classroom and open the PDF if you need to use a worksheet. So tomorrow, I've given you some assignments. You have 4 assignments each day. So you have this activity called What Makes Money Money. I see 8 of you have gotten into the Google Classroom already. And what I do for each of these is I give you an entire lesson plan and the things that you need to do in order to fill out, to do an activity in the lesson plan. So for What Makes Money Money, you're going to need to fill out this activity sheet. You're going to note the characteristics of money. You got to fill that in there. And also different commodities that could be used for money and what problems they might have. And that's going to be turned in through Google Docs and the Google Classroom. This is going to be your activity sheet that you're going to use to do it, to get information from them. And in addition to that, the lesson plan is here. There's this is taken from the, I know this looks a little janky, but I did actually have to scan this in from the Teaching the C3 Framework. Just hit myself in the face with the book. Teaching the C3 Framework book. So that's available for you there. And my goal for these are, for everything that we do, you should have a lesson plan available that you can take and use just really quickly in your room. I try as little as possible to make you plan something based on the things that you learn. You should already have a lesson plan, because I know that makes your life easier. This is just a video, short little video you have to watch. Did ancient Rome and China know about each other? This is a VMFA activity. I give you a scavenger hunt. You'll notice that each one, if you click the drop down, it says your assignment. There's an introduction at the top, and then what you have to do. Choose one activity from this website. And by the way, this is what I mean by one activity. Suggested activities. You can pick any one of these things and do the activity. And each one of these suggested activities is based on this work of art that they have here, an ancient work of art that they have there on the left. So this is what I talked about earlier, resource sharing, how I learn about history. You're going to add one resource, explore 2 of them, and you're going to leave a comment on this Google Doc. And so I've already turned in right here for learning econ, planet money, and the indicator. Honestly, if you're one of the many people that says, oh my gosh, economics was so hard in school, I didn't know anything, I hated my professor, it was boring, I didn't understand it, then you really should listen to Planet Money or the Indicator each week. And they're fun and engaging, and you'll learn a lot more about econ, and then you won't have to feel like that anymore. And I didn't include any other lesson plans because all the good lesson plans well, not all the good ones, but I included a lot of those just in the Institute. But I included a plug for a couple things that have taught me a lot lately. The Silk Roads by Peter Frankopan. Read this book. It's great. It puts the Silk Roads at the center of world history. The Decline and Rise of Democracy. Read this book. It talks about sort of factors that underlie whether a region has autocracy or democracy to this day. And this podcast here, I cannot get enough of this, Revolutions. This is pretty much the only podcast I listen to anymore. It's Mike Duncan. He goes through, it's a 30 or 40-minute podcast where he goes through first, let's see, like the English Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, and you just learn a ton about history. It's halfway in between. It's not too dry, but not too chatty at the same time, which I think is perfect. And you're going to have the opportunity to add to this document as well, so we can all become lifelong learners. The next day, and by the way, when I say the next day, you are going to decide your own pace for tomorrow and Wednesday. And you could just do all this in one day if you want. Or you could split it between 2 days. Or you could cram it all in on Wednesday night. But please have this stuff done by Wednesday. Oh dear. But please do have it done by the time that we reconvene for the field trip to VMFA. So there's going to be another gallery hunt on Wednesday. There's this lesson plan, and actually this is from a different book. This is from Understanding in Economics and Civics and Government, which is also on your virtual economics flash drive. But the relationship between economic and political freedom is one of the standards at the very end of your World History Standards for World History 2. And it says, explore the relationship between economic and political freedom. And we have a lesson plan here that explores the relationship between economic and political freedom. So, hey, spot on, right? And as usual, I have what your assignment is right down there. Should I join the t-shirt boycott? This is based on a webinar that I did. Oh gosh, we don't have the link. Where did that go? Might need to add the link. Oh, here we go. So don't be thrown off. This says U.S. history and the C3 framework. Why are sweatshop workers usually young women? This actually is very world history based. I just had to use this lesson for something pertaining to U.S. history. That's why I emphasized the Lowell Mills right here. That's the U.S. part. But here you're going to need to give yourself to watch the 50-minute webinar, and included in that are a discussion of the sources that you're going to need to use to answer the question. And the sources are also here in this PowerPoint right there. There's a resource list, a video, some sample letters, and this is an inquiry activity where you actually have to draw out information from these young women's letters as to why they're working in a factory. And you're going to look at some costs and benefits of factory work. And you are going to decide whether you're going to join the t-shirt boycott. And that's all based on the C3 framework. I know that some of you are in district divisions that are using the C3 framework. They're using the inquiry development model, the IDM. Some are not. So I tried to include a couple lessons that use that so that you can bring back some inquiry-based lessons. And I'm going to have you study some lesson plans that are inside your, that are either here or on virtual economics that we weren't able to cover in depth, or that we did. And you can discuss those as well, so that you'll leave here knowing a bunch of lesson plans. All right, on Thursday, we're going to meet at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. Here's your directions. Free parking instructions. They have a parking garage, which is disguised as a hill, and just use those directions to get to it. It might seem like you're paying for parking at first because the machine's going to let you in. It's going to say, hey, take a ticket. It costs $6. And you're going to be scared that you're going to have to pay $6, but just take the ticket, and we're going to give you a little chit. Oh gosh, I just noticed I have 15 chat messages. I haven't checked those yet. You're going to have a little chit that we give you in the museum so that you can pay your parking and get out of there. And we're going to give you a gift card at VMFA that you can use in their cafe. So we're going to give you $15 that you can spend for lunch. So that should be enough to get you a really nice lunch there. And they have a ton of options. And I can't guarantee all of, you'll have to go to the website if you have dietary restrictions, but there's enough options there that I think everybody, you know, if you're gluten-free, there's an option there for you. Okay. Let me check these chats really quick. Make sure that we're not having any drastic difficulties. Okay, some people are how to get in. Okay, couple. All right, let's take a minute to try to get into the Google Classroom. A lot of folks are saying, I can't get in, wait, I can get in after all. And I have not quite able to ascertain whether we've all done that or not. So, is there anybody who hasn't been able to get in yet who's tried? Oh, looks like we've got almost everybody. Okay. All right, very good. Okay, that was Chesterfield is blocked. Madeline, have you been unable to get in? Chesterfield.
I have not tried it yet. I don't know whether I don't think I can get into it from. I might have to go through my other account. Wait a minute. Let me go see it over there and see if I can.
Okay. Well, the good news, one reason why I did things, though I set things up the way that I did is so that you have a day to be able to go get on Google Classroom. So if you are, if Chesterfield has blocked it entirely and you can't get on it, then you should be able to make it through the day today. And then you can go to Starbucks and
I can use my other account. I can use my personal account.
Yeah.
And then I'll just send you an email saying this is my personal account. Does that work? Okay. And is the address for Google Classroom, if you're not going to, I'm going to see if I can circumvent their block because it's not showing up in the menu. Is it google.classroom?
Just Google Classroom and then use the access code.
Okay.
Yeah, just Google it. Okay. All right, so I gave you a huge blast of info about everything. Are there any questions about what we're going to do?
Yeah, it's been blocked. I'm sorry.
If you can't get into the Google Classroom, don't go into red alert mode right now. It'll be helpful for when you go through these activities, but it's not absolutely necessary. Okay. Okay. Yeah, so don't thrash around now trying to get in if it's not an emergency. Okay. And no questions? I can't believe there's no questions, dude. We talked about a field trip, we talked about asynchronous learning, we talked about this day, but hey. If not, then we should, oh yes, Haley.
Yeah, quick question. My husband is also a teacher. He teaches math, but would he be welcome to come to VMFA maybe he doesn't necessarily have to be in the classroom with us, but would he be able to come and do things with us, or is it limited just to the people that attend?
Yeah. He could definitely come. Would you actually have him register for the Institute? You'd be willing to do that?
I can do that, yeah.
Yeah, and that way I'll just have a record of him. It's good for me to be able to just get the count.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much.
We even welcome math teachers. Yeah, Cameron.
I was just waving because I am a math teacher.
Oh, okay.
I actually do have a degree in history, and when I graduated college, there were no openings in my part of the country for history, so math was what was open, and I've been stuck in that 20 years. But I've still never understood this. A degree in history with a teaching license for social studies somehow qualifies you to teach economics, which I took intro to economics, and I got stuck teaching EPF because we had an opening, and math oddly does not qualify you to teach economics. But
yeah, and we should keep talking about that actually, because I mean, I think it's like the higher up you go, the more mathy econ gets, to where when you go for a PhD, in fact, the econ department here at VCU says if you want a PhD in econ, you should minor, your undergrad should be in math. And because then you can learn the econ later. But when you're in elementary in K-12, it's very much a social study. And then in undergrad, it's kind of a hybrid. It's a bit more analytical, but you still learn a lot of social stuff, but it's difficult. Without harping on this too much, I really am hoping to do a project when I get a chance to bring econ into K-12 math a lot more than it is. So Cameron, if you want to talk about that, or
yeah, well, I mean, I teach high school math, and especially when I get up to things like exponential functions, your compound interest formula is an exponential function. So the easiest examples to work in, since a lot of those kids that I have at Algebra 2 and beyond are working on the economic stuff, because we do economics closer to junior year. We do our EPF unit. So I try to use a lot of examples. Now, even though compound interest isn't exactly the right formula for a number of things, so I use more of the personal finance. I'd love to work in more of the economics side, which in EPF, we actually don't even bother with that too much.
Yeah, let's talk, you and I, because I definitely want to, I actually was hoping to connect with some math teachers about that. And actually this transitions well into our introduction time. We want to let's all introduce ourselves. And can you say what your name is, where you teach, and could you also say what part of history you like, or not part of, well, I know that we actually have most people here don't just teach world history. And so even though we're focusing on world history today, I know that I'm going to be talking about world history a lot, but I know that most of you teach something else as well. Most of you teach also civics and economics, or EPF, or US history, or sometimes business as well. So, but let's try to stick to history so far. So just say, what's your part of history that you like teaching the most, or that you like studying the most? And if you need to explain that, try to keep it to a one-sentence explanation. So our introductions are about 15 to 20 seconds long each, so that the whole thing takes probably about 10 minutes, okay? So sound good? All right, so my name is Stephen Day. I teach at Virginia Commonwealth University. I teach Introduction to Economics for future elementary teachers here, and as well as running the center. And my favorite time of history, I like teaching the French Revolution, is what I like. And it is so hard to teach because so much stuff happens. But I used to make my students make their own movie with video cameras about the French Revolution, which really helped. And it was hilarious. And it actually got a lot of views on YouTube, and students would watch it year to year, and that made them actually learn about the events of the French Revolution, which I was kind of proud of myself about. All right. Elizabeth, you're at the top left of my screen. So can you please introduce yourself?
My name is Elizabeth Wenrick, and I teach at St. Veronica. I teach at a Catholic school in Northern Virginia. And my favorite thing to teach is King Henry VIII.
Nice. In fact, we're going to use them as an example. Ross, please go ahead.
My name is Ross Oblosky. I teach in Franklin County down in Southwest Virginia. My favorite thing to teach is Greece and Rome. I teach all the ancient stuff.
Yeah. When I first started teaching, I spent so much time on Greece and Rome because I had a history book and was just teaching it as I learned it. But yeah, can't get enough of it.
Yeah, my story is very similar to yours. I only did US, and then they said, here's world history. So it's been great learning all that.
I wonder if that's a lot of our stories, actually. Let us know if it is. Felicia, you're next on my screen.
Good morning. My name is Felicia Rovenold. I work at Norfolk Collegiate here in lovely Norfolk, Virginia, southeast corner, if you don't know. I happen to be a science teacher with a history background, and what I love to throw in my science is all of the ancient machinery and ancient technology that has shaped our world to what it is now, which touches on the history part while in science. That's my favorite.
Science teachers are also welcome here. Thanks, Felicia. Julie D.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Julie Carter. I am an art teacher I'm just retired from King and Queen County. And teaching art, I teach history along with art lessons. They're incorporated. And let me see, I gotta share my screen, sorry.
Oh, you don't need to share your screen.
Okay, all right, but I am going to be working this school year 2 days a week at All Saints Catholic there in Richmond. And I'll be teaching pre-K through 7. I've taught through my 34 years of teaching pre-K through 12th grade. And when I talked to Twyla about getting some more recertification, this class came up, and I have always been interested in the Silk Road trade because I found out from my genealogy that some of the people that are my ancestors had participated in the Silk Road trade, and it just seemed really interesting.
Juliana.
Hi, I'm Juliana Heights. I teach at Idea Mentions Academy for Math and Science in Northern Virginia. And I teach econ and personal finance, as well as honors economics. And so don't teach history, although I do really, really enjoy teaching the Great Recession, which for our kids is history for them. But one of the things I want to do in my honors econ class is add some more events in history where economics was at the forefront.
I have some great resources for teaching the Great Recession if you want even more of them. So reach out if you do want to. And that's amazing. When I first started teaching that, you've all probably experienced this. You teach something as a current event, and then a couple of years later, you notice that the students need updating on it because it's a couple of years old. And a couple of years later, you're like, oh my gosh, this is history. They were babies, or they weren't born when this thing happened. So yeah. Okay, Jenna.
I'm Jenna Gubbles, and I also teach at St. Veronica's in Chantilly at a Catholic school with Elizabeth Wenrick. I teach second grade though, and I joined the class because I've always loved ancient history. I was homeschooled as a kid, and that's what we studied, was world history and ancient history, and I've always found it fascinating. And I do teach about the Mayans and the Aztecs during our social studies units when we cover Mexico, and then our short economic unit at the end of the year. So I was like, well, maybe I'll get some ideas, but if not, I'll enjoy learning.
Yeah, and we have lots of K5 resources and K3 resources. So if in addition to the stuff that we do for 9th, 10th grade world history, if you want more stuff for second grade, I've got it. So
yeah, I took the K-5 Institute.
Okay.
Years ago.
Okay, so yeah, so super. Madeline, proceed.
Thank you. My name is Madeline Smith, and I'm in Chesterfield. I teach at Midlothian High School, and the bulk of all the classes I'm a social studies teacher. The bulk of all the classes I've taught have been World One and Econ. So this is perfect. As far as my I begrudgingly started teaching econ, but since I started teaching, and that was the first year that they had it as a requirement, but ever since I started teaching that, it's been like I have developed, for me, the class is kind of like a cautionary tale to the kids. Be careful, because there's people out there that want to take advantage of you. And then as far as my favorite part of history, well, it's going to be World One, probably. I love everything in World One. I really like the Middle Ages. I like the beginning of banking in the Middle Ages, which is interesting. And I like Greece and Rome. I mean, I love the Renaissance. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I like in what I teach. So yeah, and econ, I like econ too.
Yeah, you had to say that. All right.
Me to do so.
Yeah. Yeah, Cameron, you started telling us about your background, but please finish.
Okay, well, I'm David Cameron. I teach at Nelson, so almost slap in the middle of the state, in the middle of nowhere. And by the way, anyone that wants to move to a rural area, we have openings. I'm sure some of you in public ed have some openings. We had, my high school, we had probably 20 pop up, and we still have a bunch left, and we start in what, 3 weeks? But I have a degree in history, I have a minor in math. I'm from New England originally, and just not a lot of history jobs 20 years ago. So went into math, been there ever since, don't regret it. When it comes to history, the nice thing about having a history background while teaching math is the kids think you know absolutely everything that exists, and you don't have to, you know, you can pretend that, that's fine. I had a professor who was a medievalist out of Oxford, and so that's sort of, and she was my primary professor in undergrad, and so that's sort of where I tend to fall as a Middle Ages. Not a lot of math advancement necessarily. If you want to look at the big math advancement, you got to get earlier into Greece, Rome, and specifically you get to Egypt or you get to Central America. But I don't know, all the backstabbing popes and I mean, please, 3 popes at a time. It's just great stuff to follow and watch.
Thank you. Patricia, go ahead.
Morning. My name is Patricia Rumler. I'm a special education teacher at Albemarle High School in Charlottesville. I have collabed and co-taught in economics and personal finance, and before the pandemic, I was working in World History 1. My favorite time is I like to study Egypt, ancient Egypt, and I'm not sure what I'll be working in this year, but I'm interested in this topic.
Great, thank you. I just have on your screen, I have you as Chewed or C Hood. C Hood, would you go ahead and then, and when you get a chance, could you change your name so that we can call you your proper name? Go ahead.
Sure. My name's Chad Hood. Obviously, you can tell by my dialect, I'm from the tip of Southwest Virginia. I teach at Wise County Regional Learning Academy. I teach U.S. history. I teach world history. Also do world geography as well as personal finance and economics. Probably the favorite thing in U.S. history is probably around Civil War or World War II eras. And then in world history, I guess my favorite is Greece.
Yeah, I had a family reunion a couple weeks ago by Fontana Lake in North Carolina, and I was fascinated that they have a kind of, down there they don't say y'all, they say yins. Do they say yins in your part of the country? And are you familiar with this?
They do it both ways here. Yeah.
They do it both ways, so it's kind of fading in over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, back in Fontana Lake, they only say yins, and it was really confusing at first. Yeah, man, dialect is amazing. Okay, Haley, go ahead. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so sorry, I have a 4-month-old cat here. There's 2 of them if you ever see them. But I teach world history at Caroline High School in Caroline County, and I also just found out I'm teaching African American history, which is a new elective course that the VDOE just put out a curriculum for. But I majored in political science, so government is really my favorite thing to talk about, all things government.
Oh, great. I held up this book earlier. Make sure you check that out on virtual economics as well, even though it's a bit higher level. So Haley, So Carol, you say you teach in Caroline County, or is that
Yeah.
part of your name? Okay, great. I would want to make sure that we shouldn't call you Caroline.
Yeah.
And we assume that you have a degree from University of Mary Washington.
Yeah. Yes. And I see there's a fellow alum as well.
All right, Jean, proceed, please. And you are muted.
Sorry about that. My name is Gene Matthews. I teach for Hanover County Public Schools. I would say I usually teach government, but occasionally they give me War History 1. And for War History 1, my favorite era is probably ancient Egypt. And I would like to say that I am unable to get into Google Classroom, and I'm one of those folks that I like to have everything kind of laid out. So any suggestions that people can give me, I've been trying different ways. I still cannot get on. It keeps telling me. It keeps telling me that my account will recognize the code, but my account won't access it. So,
are you using a school email address?
What's that?
Are you using a school email address for it?
Well, I think my Google Classroom is hooked up to my school email address, even though I'm on my personal computer, not my school issue computer.
Okay. Usually the shortest way from A to B is to try to use a personal address instead of the school one. So
is there and I'm sorry to digress the conversation here. Is there a simple way to change get on the Google Classroom from my personal email address? Because I've never done that before.
Yeah, if you click, someone just said you can switch accounts. And if you're in Google, at the top right of your screen, you'll see your the letter that says which account you're working with. In fact, I can share my screen with you right quick so you can see it. So you see here on mine, that S right there.
Correct.
If you click on that, it'll say that I can go to my personal one, my VCU one. I can add another account.
So I just basically want to go and add another account and add my personal email there, supposedly.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give that a go. So sorry for getting off topic, everybody.
Oh no, that's crucial information.
I appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Okay, Catherine, go ahead. Catherine Green.
Hi, I'm Catherine Green. I teach in Richmond at Albert Hill Middle School. I teach 8th grade civics and economics. I don't teach history, and I didn't major in history. I actually was an econ and political philosophy double major. So my favorite thing to teach is the Enlightenment philosophers.
Oh, I love teaching that. When I got my applied for a job at a new school in Raleigh way back in the day, and I had to teach a sample lesson. That's what I chose to teach, was the Enlightenment philosophers, and I got the job, so it worked. Bridget, please proceed. You're muted for now.
Sorry, I'm currently in the middle of taking a Holocaust class too. I teach in Highland County, Virginia. I teach US 2, civics, world geography, and personal finance.
Perhaps.
And I've had the privilege of taking classes with Dr. Day before. Unfortunately, I had to go to Richmond and was not a fan of Richmond traffic. So I'm kind of glad this one's here.
Don't ever go to Northern Virginia if you don't like Richmond.
Now, I already told my principal that if he ever or I ever sign up for something in that part of the state, he's driving. I'm not driving.
All right. Well, you can stay in the comfort. Oh no. Well, you do have to come to Richmond on Thursday. If you get off at the Boulevard exit, you don't need to make any turns before you get to the VMFA. It'll take you right there. We will take care of you. Okay, we've got 4 more people. Donna, please proceed.
Hi, my name's Donna Schrum, and I teach at Central High School in Woodstock, Virginia, which is in the Shenandoah Valley. I started out as a history major at Mary Washington College, and graduated in 1987. Couldn't get a job because I couldn't coach football, and so I taught English for the past 20-some years. And so this is my 4th year back in history. I specialized in Tudor England in both my English and history degrees, but I was given ancient world history when I arrived, and I really love it. And my favorite thing to teach is Hannibal, and also just the evolution of military strategy and tactics and weapons. Like, I love to talk about how Philip of Macedon changed everything by just introducing the sarissa. So, yeah.
Yeah, teaching the military history, that kind of it's kind of a lost art in some ways in history, but I think historians will often argue that those battles are actually the contingency on which a lot of stuff hinges, right? If one side wins, stuff could kind of go in a different direction. Yeah, I too love military history. My kids do as well. Okay, Nathan, please proceed.
Hi, I'm Nathan Morrison. I teach at Atlee High School. I don't know, I'm frozen there. Atlee High School in Hanover County. I teach history and philosophy there. And I think anything new is my favorite thing to teach. I like learning new topics and new subjects. And that's what I really enjoy about teaching.
That would be so amazing, teaching a philosophy course. Do you teach it sort of more formally, or do you teach through, I know sometimes philosophy teachers teach through fallacies. What do you do?
So there's a IB history or IB philosophy course that I teach. It's mostly discussion based with students, is the general approach we take.
I know our philosophy teacher, I knew that had to post a sign that said, logic does not trump parental authority, because his students kept on going home and telling their parents that they were objectively wrong about the arguments they had at home. So I wonder if you can get there. We are done, right? Do we have anybody else? Did we miss anybody? Oh, Jackie, sorry about that. Go ahead.
That's okay. Hi, I'm Jackie Bruce. I teach at Thomas Jefferson High School in Richmond, Virginia. I'm the history department chair as well. And being a liberal arts person who majored in political science, I love interdisciplinary things. I have primarily taught world history too, the modern world history and the econ and personal finance. And I would say that my teaching philosophy is that everything is connected. So there's never really one particular thing that I like more than the other. I just like to see how historical moments influence us fully, and how different strains interpret the world. So that's kind of how I teach my students how to make connections from one to the other. And so they understand that, the art and the artist is going to pick up a paintbrush or a charcoal, and a scientist is going to try to analytically figure out the world, and a movement person is going to interpret it through motion, and that these events all affect people in different ways. My favorite time period, I would say, that I most enjoy teaching is the Industrial Revolution, which also overlays a personal interest area of mine, which is the Great Migration in the United States. And I love to see how economics and financial security are looked at through a civil rights lens, and how prosperity or disparity has affected people and influences their decisions. So that's pretty much it, but we have a full array of classes in our department. I love coming to all your workshops, Stephen. And because we start at 1500, I do kind of dip back into Greco-Roman culture just to get the kids aligned with the Black Death and what's going on before we set up the world around that time. So we do even teach about pandemics, which has been very valuable for me. So this class is going to help me with a little bit more foundational things, and I'm always looking for ways to tie into resources that are locally available. So thank you so much for putting this together, and I'm really happy to be in that first group of people to take it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for being here, and thank everybody for being here. Okay, everybody, let's dive right in. Why don't we? All right. So we're going to start with the economic way of thinking. We're going to do decision-making models as well. And that'll be our kind of intro to econ and intro to how to use the decision-making models in history, which I know can sometimes be confusing when you're on that standard 1 in social sciences. Then we'll take a break, and then we'll go on to lesson plans, all right, for the world history book. So I'll share everything with you, including this PowerPoint that I'm about to show. But you can take notes if you want or not. Sometimes it's nice to have the talking points to go along with them. If you've taken one of my institutes before, you're going to be very familiar with this, and I will not apologize for you getting it again because the economic way of thinking lies at the foundation of everything that we do for economic thinking. So here we go. All right, are you all, you all see that full screen? Okay. Okay, so like I said before, the economics is a way that we think conceptually about how people make choices. Again, I repeat, a way that we think conceptually about how people make choices. So when I say conceptually, it's not strictly and first evidence-based, right? You're not first going to sources, you're first thinking of concepts. It's not necessarily a process, in that it's not just like the scientific method, which has a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 step sort of thing. In economics, what you do is you have to know the concepts and think which concept is going to illuminate the situation at hand. That's what I mean by thinking conceptually. It has an array of concepts that don't necessarily lie in order. You've got to learn the concepts, just a few of them, and then you could use those to spotlight some evidence. So we have 6 concepts in the basic economic way of thinking. I'm going to tell you all 6. So the first one is, because of scarcity, people choose. So scarcity is the situation where we don't have enough resources to meet all of our goals. Now this is, scarcity is taught differently in different situations. If you teach economics and personal finance, you might have it as when people have limited resources but unlimited wants, which I don't like teaching it like that way anymore, because people always get hung up on the unlimited wants part, because you can think, well, people should be satisfied with what they have. Why should they have unlimited wants? And to that I say, okay, fair enough, actually. But the thing is that sometimes our goals that we have for life are in tension with each other. You can't have all of them, right? So we don't actually have enough resources to meet all of our goals. Our goals might be, we want stuff for our children, we want things for ourselves, we want things for our community, we want things for our world. And when you make a choice to benefit, say, yourself, let's say your own mental health, it can come at the expense of what's best for your kids. And so we often do what's best for our kids at the expense of our own mental health. I know I do anyway. My wife sure does. So we don't have enough resources to meet all of our goals. Another bit of evidence for this is that the short term and the long term often come into conflict with each other. So let's say that I want to save up for college. I've got 4 children, ages 8, 6, 4, and 2. I want them to have the opportunity to go to college someday. And so we save now to take advantage of compound interest in a 529 account. And they're good for the future. To have money for college interferes with their good now, which is upgrading the house, sending them to activities, things like that. So, you know, I don't have to have unlimited wants in order to not be able to meet all of my goals. I want, in both cases, I want what's good for my kids, but it's this tension between, do I put them in things to boost their human capital now, or do I save for for the future. So my kids don't get that extra music lesson now, but they do get saving for college. That's how that's how we're not able to meet all of our goals. And because we can't meet all of our goals because things are scarce, we need to make choices. And that's why the study of economics is necessary. Scarcity does not necessarily mean having enough to live. That is not the definition of scarcity. You can be everybody experiences scarcity. Even Bill Gates, even Elon Musk experience scarcity because they need to make choices about their time too. And as a matter of fact, if you have a lot of resources, you actually feel the pinch of scarcity even more because your time is more valuable. So when you make a choice, the things that you give up are even more valuable than for people who are not as well off. Which brings us to choice number 2, which is every concept number 2, which is that every choice has a cost, an opportunity cost. So opportunity cost is the opportunity that you say no to. It's choice number 2, the second best choice. It's the choice that you give up. It's the option that you give up when you make a choice. So your opportunity cost is not just goods and services. It's not just saying, I'm going to choose the shoes, but give up the coat. It's also saying, I'm going to choose to save for college tuition later, and I'm going to refuse, putting my kids in lessons now. I just saw, can the agenda go in the class Google Classroom? Yeah, I can put it up. I didn't put it in there yet, but I can put it there soon. So let me ask for a little help from y'all right here. Jackie, you were the one that talked last, and so you're in the top of my little stack on Zoom. You see there some boots and some slippers. If you had a choice between the boots and the slippers, which would you choose?
The boots.
You choose the boots. So what's your opportunity cost?
The slippers.
Okay, there you go. But do I have a third? Oh, there we go. Oh, making it hard for you now. If you had to choose between the boots, the slippers, and the watch, what would be your number 1 choice?
I'd probably still pick the boots.
What would be choice number 2?
The watch.
Okay.
And then the slippers.
Okay. So let me ask y'all out there, what is the opportunity cost here? If her boots are number 1, the watch is number 2, the slippers are number 3, what's the opportunity cost here? Anybody can answer. I can't see everybody, so you're just going to have to speak up if you want to answer.
Both the watch and the slippers are the opportunity cost.
Oh, Jenna, we have tricked you in a way that most people are tricked. Look at the first, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot, I really am, but look at the first sentence here. Opportunity cost is the second best choice. It's not second and third. It's not second through forever. So why is this? Why is it that, so you choose one thing, why is it that the opportunity cost wouldn't be absolutely everything else? Well, the answer to that is that you only have the opportunity to get one thing, so you only give up one thing. You never had the opportunity to have infinity other things, right? Another way to say that is that if you're weighing your costs and benefits of your choice, when you're asking what would I give up, it's really only meaningful if you can identify a specific thing that you're giving up. If you said you're giving up everything, well, then the benefits of everything would outweigh the benefits of the one thing that you choose, and that would screw up our analysis. So opportunity cost is always choice number 2. And then what you do is you can subtract the value of your second best choice from the first best choice, and that's what gives you your marginal benefit. So that's why I try to make it the most straightforward definition is opportunity cost is choice number 2. All right, so let's move on from that. Oh yeah, a couple ways you can teach this to your students are a couple catchy phrases to say. Choosing is refusing. when you make one choice, you refuse something else. I actually have taught this to my kids, and when they're as little as 2 years old, because let's say you go into the grocery store and the kids can get a free cookie over in the bakery, and they can get the rainbow cookie or they can get the chocolate chip cookie. And my child Daisy says, both. And I say, you need to make a choice. And she says, both. And I say, you need to choose one, you need to refuse one. And then I make her point at one and say, choose, and make it point at the other one and say, refuse. And then even though she doesn't want to say it, I'm sort of like, you need to refuse one of these. And then later on when she says, I want both, I'm like, you said that you refused the rainbow cookie. Y'all, it doesn't work. It's not an ironclad way to parent. It's not, because, kids don't listen to reason. But at the same time, I think it can make it clear to the kids that they have to, that let's say if they say we choose the pool, we refuse the park. If we choose going to the river, we refuse going to the Civil War battlefield, right? Choosing is refusing. Another way to say it is an opportunity cost is an opportunity lost. And maybe this is why we think of economics as the dismal science. It's not why it was originally called the dismal science. Actually, it was originally called the dismal science because economists actually had more sort of a liberal view that wanted free trade and stuff. And the people that called it the dismal science didn't like that. Economists didn't like social engineering. Actually, it was kind of a weird progressive era sort of thing, where they thought that they could engineer everything, and the economists said that they couldn't. That's why it was called the dismal science. Today, we more think of it as the dismal science because economists are the ones who are saying that you got to refuse things. But really, this is what makes it powerful, because it forces you to bring your choices into stark relief and to say, if we're going to make a choice here, we need to clear out our opportunity costs and get a really clear view of the power of our choice. I like to tell the students, your choices are powerful. And opportunity cost is what allows you to see very clearly the power of what you choose versus the thing that you refuse. Okay, moving on. People respond predictably to incentives. This is, if economics has a method, this is the method right here. Is based on the two assumptions from 1 and 2. Because of scarcity, we need to make choices. Every choice has an opportunity cost. We go straight to, well, how do we look at those? By people's incentives. People respond predictably to incentives. So there are rewards and consequences that encourage people to act. And incentives are not necessarily money. A lot of times when we hear this, we think financial incentives, especially if you're from a state like North Carolina, where they were trying to give teachers financial incentives to teach better, along with restrictions on their job security. That didn't go over very well. So this made that difficult to teach during that era in North Carolina. So this is not money incentives, though it can be money incentives. It means just things that motivate you, right? So let me ask you this. What is, and I'm going to stop my share so I can look you all in the face. What is an incentive that you had to come to the Institute this week? What is a benefit that it could bring you? What is one thing that made you say, why should I go to this Institute? Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Recertification points.
Recertification points. Donna says improving SOL scores. Great. So yeah, so you have a desire to increase SOL scores. You have a desire to get recertified.
An extra project for the kids to do.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Extra project for the kids to do. Nobody said just the love of history and econ.
I was going to say the knowledge, just the knowledge.
The knowledge. Yeah. Chad says new ideas in the classroom. Super. Okay. So the thing is, I hate to say it, y'all, that there are not just positive incentives to attend this institute. There's also reasons not to, right? So what are some costs, or what are some things that would disincentivize you from taking the institute?
I thought about this. I think for a lot of teachers, especially with the hybrid, if they want hybrid or virtual this year, just getting on the computer again, it's like a lot of people just don't even when they want to zone out completely this summer. And it could have been a deterrent that it was part virtual. But then when it was part in person, it's like that probably drew some people in too, that it wasn't just going to be another Zoom thing.
Yeah. So, Donna says cuts into remaining time that I have to spend with my husband before going back to work in 2 weeks. She had to choose between us and her husband, and she chose us. Good for it. Jackie says just being on Zoom more. Chad says I have to come to Richmond. Well, yeah, boy, that would be quite a road trip for you, wouldn't it, Chad? The tip of Southwest Virginia coming clear to Richmond. And you're not going to make it, are you? We understand. Okay, so yeah, there's some, 6 hours, no, 12-hour round trip. That would be a bit much. Good thing that they have a lot of online resources you can use. So there's reasons not to come. And y'all, let's spend a moment to spare a thought for the people who wanted to come and then either had to cancel or who almost clicked that register button and then just couldn't bring themselves to do it, right? Their costs and their benefits were very close and the costs barely exceeded the benefit, so they said no. We all respond to incentives. You may know about Richard Thaler and Daniel Kahneman, who won the Nobel Prize for Economics, the Nobel Memorial Prize, a couple of years ago, because they found out that the incentives that we respond to are broader than we originally thought. We appear to behave irrationally sometimes because sometimes the incentives we respond to are just in our brain. They're hardwired into our psychology. And so they might appear irrational from the outside, but they're rational only inside our heads. We've had to kind of expand our definition of incentives in econ because of their work. Okay, let's proceed. Number 4, economic systems influence choices and incentives. So our incentives are not just what's inside our heads and hearts. Our incentives also come from outside of us. Economic rules, economic systems, culture, and as rules change, our incentives change. So yes, Jackie.
Can you share your screen again?
Oh, thank you for saying that. There you go. So as rules change, incentives change. So you don't need to answer this, but did any of you did anybody in 2019 wear a surgical mask around town? Maybe some. I actually have seen it. Jackie says that she did. So yeah, maybe a couple of you did. It wasn't unheard of, especially during flu season. But I'm guessing that most of us did not wear a mask around town in 2019. And then in 2020, a lot of us did. So you can see that there were the rule. In fact, there might have been rules that a business we went into sent out that said you need to have a mask to come in. Sometimes it came from the state government that said you have to wear a mask in these situations. Other times it might have been a cultural rule, like here in VCU. Felicia says she lived in Japan. Everyone always wears one. Okay, that would be a cultural rule right there. It's just something that you kind of do. Here in Richmond around VCU, there was a big mask wearing culture. So even outside walking around, people tended to wear masks. And so even if they weren't required to, that was sort of a cultural thing. So I like and then maybe, and if you live not in Richmond, there might be, the cultural expectation might be that you don't wear a mask if you're outside, and people would look at you weird if you did. And of course, that's been a bit controversial this year. But the point is, why I use masks is because it's a current event, but also because it shows that sometimes the incentives can come from rules from the government. They can come from rules from a private person or business, or they can just come from expectations from the people around you. There's lots of different rules and economic systems that we have around us. And as the rules change, they can affect our incentives as well. Okay. In a voluntary trade, both sides expect to benefit. Another way to say this is specialize in what you do best and trade for the rest. So in economics, it is often said that there's no such thing as a free lunch. But I'll tell you what, trade is actually the thing where a free lunch can happen. And that's in that when two sides trade, it creates benefit, even though you haven't created any new stuff. Let me give you an example. Let's say that there is a carpenter who lives on land, who owns land that has large deposits of iron ore. Carpenter can't do much with that iron because he's a carpenter. There is a blacksmith that lives in and owns a hardwood forest. Great selection of hardwood trees. However, the blacksmith can't do much, can't make much with that wood because he's a blacksmith. However, if these two people trade, you know, if maybe they don't sell their lands, maybe they do sell the land to each other. But by that simple trade, what would happen is all of a sudden the blacksmith can make tons of stuff with the iron, the carpenter can make a bunch of stuff with the wood, and the simple fact of trade makes both these people way more productive. And all of a sudden there's great wood and metal products being made because of trade. That increase in wealth wouldn't have been possible without the trade. And so when trade is voluntary and when it's available, it creates wealth. You'll see kids in the cafeteria, you don't even have to teach them to trade, do you? Right? You'll say, hey, I'll trade you my gummy bears for your cookie, right? Now notice that when they make that trade, no new gummy bears are created, no new cookies are created, and yet by the fact of the trade, they were able to achieve their goals. They're able to be more happy. They're able to gain utility. That's kind of a free lunch, isn't it? You like your lunch more as a result of the trade. Trade is where the magic happens, y'all. Trade is where the magic happens. What I want to do is we have a little activity about trade. So I'm going to point out, I'm going to go to the last slide, and then we'll backtrack to our trade activity, okay? So the last one is kind of a catch-all. The consequences of our choices lie in the future. And so there is risk. Actually, there's several implications. Because the consequences of our choices lie in the future, there's risk. There can be unintended consequences, and we can be tempted to take part in the sunk cost fallacy. The sunk cost fallacy is when we try to unearth costs and benefits from the past, things that can't affect our life anymore, and we try to make them affect our life. So actually, let me explain sunk cost first. We cannot influence things that happened in the past, which is what we call sunk cost. So there is this festival back in Indiana, for an example, where I'm from, and it's called the Feast of the Hunter's Moon. Don't ask. It's a French colonial era thing. And we would buy tickets to this thing every year. And my mom bought us all tickets for like $8 each, which, you know, in 1990 was more money than it is now. And so we got these $8 tickets, you know, family of six, $48, very expensive. And the night before the Feast of the Hunter's Moon, it rained and rained and rained and rained. It just turned everything into a muddy bog. And it was raining the next day, and it was going to be miserable. Like, none of us wanted to go. And my mom said, yeah, but we've got to go because what? Because we bought the tickets, you know? Even though we're going to be miserable, we've got to do it because in the past we bought the tickets. And my dad, an economist, helpfully told her that she had succumbed to the sunk cost fallacy, which, you know, she appreciated deeply that her husband explained this to her and said, but the consequences of our choice lie in the future. If we're going to be miserable, why should we go? Right? That $48 is sunk cost. It's in the past. We should do what makes us happy in the future. Similarly, if you start to watch a movie and you're like, I know I'm going to hate this movie. I think I was watching a movie with my wife, a rom-com. I actually like rom-coms in general, but sometimes they are way too predictable. And this was one of the ones where I was like, hold on a second. Do they meet each other? They hit it off. It's whimsical. There's a misunderstanding. The misunderstanding is resolved by him running after her at the end of the film, which is somehow like what resolves their misunderstanding, and they live happily ever after. And she was like, well, yeah, that's everything. I was like, are there good one-liners? She said, no. I said, can we just turn this off? Right? Many times you'd say, well, I need to finish the movie because I started it. I have to. No, turn that movie off. Just watch a rerun of The Office. You know you're going to enjoy watching The Office again. Everybody does. You don't need to watch a movie that you think is going to be boring and lame. If you're starting to read a book and the book is terrible and you're a third of the way in and you don't look like it's going to get any better, stop reading the book, y'all. Learn to be a quitter. And was that just a little too dismal science right there? Learn to be a quitter. The reason why we look down on quitting is because it's important that we build up the, well, not the willpower, the habits of mind to stick through things that we don't want to do. That's called maturity. But, you know, that's because things that are difficult that we might be tempted to quit on, like training for sports, working out, well, there actually are costs and benefits in the future. But Madeline says not quitting, discriminating. Yeah, discriminating between what's going to be worth it and what's not. So that's sunk cost fallacy. Risk. We need to learn to weigh the relative risks in life. And that's that we don't know exactly what the future costs and benefits are going to be. But we can try to predict them as best we can and make choices based on those relative risks. And we'll do a decision-making model for that pretty soon. Because our choices can lead to unintended consequences, which, and if you use your economic thinking well, then these unintended consequences can become predictable. As we say, might have been unintended, but it was not unpredictable. So when we use economic reasoning, when we use economic concepts, economic thinking, these consequences, we can avoid unintended consequences because we can predict what's going to happen. We can say, what are the incentives we're responding to? What incentives are we giving other people? What can we predict? And that's how economic thinking can improve our lives. Okay. Kenny Rogers teaches econ. You got to know when to hold. You got to know when to fold. Oh yeah, I should have that playing in the background of this when we teach this. Okay, so let's go to this example for voluntary trade creates wealth. We're going to do this fun activity. I haven't posted this yet. When we go to break, I'm going to need to post a couple things, including the agenda. But this is a vacation choices activity. And it's going to demonstrate tray. So I'm going to assign each of you a vacation. I'm going to point it right now. Elizabeth's at the top of my screen. And I'm going to say, Elizabeth, you have won a vacation with 6 days with your family in Ocean City, Maryland. All right, great. You may love that. You know, you might say, oh, Ocean City, my favorite place in the whole world. And my family, we haven't seen each other in months and months and I miss them and this is great. But you must also, or you might also be like, what the heck am I going to do in Ocean City, Maryland? And my family are a bunch of jerks and there's always drama and arguing and I don't want to be around them, right? So I don't know if this is a good vacation for you or not, but that's kind of the point. However, Elizabeth, that's your vacation. Everybody, please pay attention because I'm going to assign you your vacation and you're not going to be able to get to see the cards because I'm going to send you to groups. So, so you're going to have to remember what your vacation is, okay? Felicia, 10 days for you and your sweetie in Hawaii. I don't know why there's a, oh, I see. Where the clip art is off. So this is the Ocean City, Maryland. You don't have to be in a tent in Hawaii. You're going to be 10 days with your sweetie in Hawaii. That's a pretty good one, I think. Okay, Jenna, 5 days tent camping at George Washington National Forest with your 2 best friends. How do you like that? Not a camper. 5 days in a tent, whether you like it or not. That's your vacation. Jackie, 7 days hiking the app alone by yourself, just you and the bears. All right. Bridget, your vacation is a 2-week staycation at your house. Some people would love that. Some people would not. Okay. Ross, you get a fabulous 7 days at the lake with your extended family. Julie, you get 6-day Caribbean cruise for you and your someone. Juliana, 5 days in New York City with your 3 besties. It's all paid for. Cameron, you get 7 days with the family in Jerusalem. Patricia, 2 weeks RV camping with the family in North Carolina. It's a roomy RV. Chad, 2 weeks to California and back on a Greyhound with one of your homies. Could write a memoir. You could write a memoir with the people you meet on the bus. Okay. Going over to Jean. Jean, you get 2 weeks and 2 airline tickets to anywhere in the world. Actually, that would be great. Even if it's just Charlotte, North Carolina. You can take that direct flight from Richmond. Donna, you get 2 weeks vacation in Costa Rica with you and a friend. Catherine, 1 week at circus camp for you and 5 family members, learning how to be in the circus, learning how to be a carny. Haley, you get to explore the wilderness for 2 weeks hiking the Rocky Mountains with your best friend. Nathan, sail away for 10 days on a tall ship cruise of the Alaska coastline, 3 friends. Madeline, pack up the family for a week at your favorite relative's house. And Rain, 5 days in Paris, France, with the love of your life. If you don't have a love of your life, one is supplied. Okay, so everyone, on a scale of 1 to 5, how much do you like your vacation? Let's do a scale of 1 to 10, okay? Now remember, a 10 means there could not even conceivably be a better vacation. So if you could actually think that there could be a better vacation, don't give yourself a 10. You want to give yourself room to grow. Chad says a 0. Donna, 3. Actually, everyone hold up the number of fingers of like 0 to 10. We've got a 4, a 9, a 5, a 6, a 3, an 8. Remember, give yourself room to grow. 6, 1, 2. All right. Okay, so everybody, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you in a group. And your job is going to be to see if you can trade a card with someone, okay? See if somebody would take, if somebody would be willing to take your vacation in exchange for theirs, okay? So let me, oh gosh. Oh, breakout rooms, here we go. So in your group, we'll spend only about 1 minute or so because we don't need a whole lot of time for this. So I'm gonna make just 3 groups, okay? So see if you can make the trade. and then decide, once you've made the trade, decide if your happiness with your vacation has increased. So let's say you started with a 2, maybe you can boost it to a 4 or a 5 or a 6, okay? So ready, get set, go. Please join your room.
Can you post?
Go ahead.
Can you post the vacation things on Google Classroom?
Yeah, absolutely, I will.
Yeah, yeah, those are great.
So let's move on to the consequences of our choices lie in the future.
Okay, share your screen, please.
There you go. Okay, so
I'm sorry,
so
I just have a question.
Oh, go ahead, Catherine.
So you said that this was a way to demonstrate how voluntary trade creates wealth.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious about the wealth that was generated from our trading in that situation.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So one way you can look at it is that, so if you go back to that we're trying to meet goals back here, right? No one has enough resources to meet all of their goals. You can look at wealth as meeting goals, right? So if you are living in ancient China, you might not have good enough or enough glassware. And that was if there's one thing that made it from Rome clear to China besides silver, it was glassware. The Romans made great glassware. And so, so you are wealthier as a result of having greater access to better glass-made materials. And at the same time, that's a goal that you have. I'm trying to create wealth and to connect wealth and goals here. Similarly, in Rome and anywhere that could connect with China, you wanted silk because China, in fact, the emperor, the imperial family was the only one that had a monopoly on silk. So, so you're wealthier because you have silk, which is extravagant, and that's also a goal that you have. So in economics, sometimes we talk about utility, the utility that that people get when they consume something. Another way to say, another example I gave was when the carpenter and the blacksmith traded, they're able to be more productive. They're able to produce stuff that people actually want as a result of trading the resources they can use to make stuff. And then with the vacation, you're not actually making new goods and services, but the goods and services that you have are now more valuable in that both sides value them more, right? Before you did the trade, you were in possession of something that you did not value, and so the value is lower. After the trade, you're in possession of something that you value more, so the value is higher. And that's why we can use wealth as that word there. Does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions about that? Okay, so the consequences of our choices lie in the future. So now we're getting into decision-making models. And you'll know from the, oh, actually, we have another question. Hold on. Madeline says, how many more utils did you get from the trade? Tingles of joy when I explained to the kids. Yeah, good. That expands on what we were just saying. So if you look here at the standards, you all will be familiar with the skills section. 1H in every history social science class. Use a decision-making model to analyze and explain the incentives for and consequences of a specific choice that was made. So we're going to start getting into ways that we can model choices. So before we get to intended and unintended consequences, let's go to the costs and benefits, because consequences intended and unintended our costs and benefits in the future. We're not going to do that just yet, but we're about to get there. So actually, I'm going to make a new slide right here. A cost and benefit analysis is really pretty straightforward in that all it takes is a T-chart like this. And this is your most basic decision-making model. I have other pre-made ones. Where you have costs on one side and benefits on the other. With little kids, Jenna, you can have a smiley face on the benefits and a sad face for the costs. With little kids, I also call them good things and bad things, but I try to make them transition into the actual words costs and benefits. So let's say that you have to make a choice. Okay, so cost and benefit analysis, you can use it for yourself. You can use it to analyze a person in history. You can use it for somebody else. But this is where we get to our most basic issue here of people respond predictably to incentives. You're going to line up people's incentives. So we already talked about your incentives to come to this institute, your benefits and your costs. We can actually go to something in history. So let's say, what are the costs and benefits to Elizabeth I of England to allow a charter for the East India Company? What are benefits and costs to that? For starters, can we get a little info? What was the East India Company? What did it mean to grant a charter to it? Tell me, two-door people.
I can tell a little bit off the, I don't, the East India Company was what allowed for trade between the Spice Islands and Eastern India, China, into England, and distributing, I guess, those goods mostly throughout Europe and the known world. It was part of the age of exploration.
Okay, yeah.
And it was giving them permission to do business on behalf of the crown, and giving the crown a big chunk of money for that privilege of the wealth that they got.
Yeah, so was the East India Company part of the English government?
I can't remember off the top. I think it was, I can't remember. I think it was a private company, and then they.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it was a private company. Yeah.
Okay, it was a private company. So why didn't the English government just do it themselves? Why didn't they just sponsor their own foreign policy and trade?
Well, they were mercantilist, and so they were trying to support the ability for individuals to make wealth. So it was
yeah, they definitely were doing that. They would have liked for it to be something that came straight from the crown, right? But the fact of the matter was, England was kind of not small fry, but they did not have a powerful central state, right? The crown it was still kind of medieval, right? The monarch had these private lands. Power was decentralized. It was still in some ways very feudalistic, and they just did not have the credit. They didn't have the power. They didn't have the money to project power overseas. So what they would do is they say, hey, if you can go do this East India venture, if you can go do an imperialistic enterprise to the other ends of the sea, what we can't fund it, but we can give you a monopoly. So we can say you're the only English people that are allowed to go do this thing. And if you can go make money, you're allowed to use force. You're allowed to build your own private army. You're allowed to keep the profits. We will block out other English people from doing the same venture, and we can even use some of the might of the English Navy to clear the shipping lanes for you. Later, of course, the English and other places would really try to make it a bit all more centralized. What they used to do is they used to just grant a monopoly to a company and say, go. So what are some benefits and costs here? This is benefits to Elizabeth I for supporting the East India Company, and what are some of the costs to her? Let's brainstorm. And this went for the Dutch too, because they had an East India.
I mean, it's a potential cost, I guess, is limiting the market for competition. I mean, it could be seen as a benefit, but it could also be a cost of you have less access to potential goods and opportunities for other people to gain wealth as well.
Okay, yeah, exactly. Back then, they didn't care so much about that because they didn't have Adam Smith, but they might have actually seen that as a benefit, but it certainly was a cost. Very good.
Something that I would put on the benefit side in my mind is not having to use their own resources. They're not having to provide the ships and the manpower. They're having a private company do that. So it's like you're saying, you know, it's not hurting their pocketbook as much.
Right, all she has to do is just do a flick of the wrist and sign the monopoly over, say go for it, right? Yeah. And so you can, so the medieval monarchs did this a lot because they found that it's the way that they could get policy carried out by buccaneering, privateering individuals, and it didn't cost them any of their own money. Good. What are some other benefits or costs? I guess I just said one, didn't I? Good. What else is there? I think somebody said one in the chat, did they? Oh, future monetary gain, says Haley. Donna says privateering. Okay. And of course, this is the privateering is going to become a problem because then what happens is you have literally a mega corporation with a private army that goes around blasting their way into foreign countries and creating international crises. And you can see why eventually this is why countries, once they could get more centralized power, would want to make things more central and use their own standing army, because it was a lot like nowadays if, let's say, Google and Facebook and Amazon and Walmart all had private armies and navies, and they could use it to go, they could use their military power to go expand their markets. You can imagine how that would look. Dystopian. Any more on these? Benefits and costs to giving the the East India Company a charter. Okay, great. So you can see how this could make us, we can allow this as a historical tool to look back. We can also say and make it a scenario. What if you are Queen Elizabeth and they come to you with this? What are, looking in the future, what choices would you give? You can always make this a scenario that people can use. By the way, what I found in history class, we don't do this enough. Because what we do is we tend to say, what happened in the past, right? But we don't, in my experience, maybe you do this in your school, but I didn't when I was teaching world history, give my students a sense of contingency and say, look, what options did these people have? What could have happened? What were their alternatives? it can really help students understand historical contingency and help them understand the risks and uncertainties that historical actors faced, rather than just saying, this is what happened, right? Okay, now let's go over to expanding this is we can have intended and unintended consequences as a result of our choices. So what you can do is you can expand this if you want. You can make this be intended benefits and intended costs. Actually, let me make a new one entirely. You can add in unintended costs and benefits. All right, so what you do in this case is you make a little table, and of course you'll have access to this. And then down in here you can have and I'll tell you right now, when you're doing a activity like this, for some reason it's the unintended costs that really you end up putting down here, because a lot of the time people make choices in it and it didn't turn out the way that they hoped it would. So let's stay in the same sort of vein. Let's go to the settling of Jamestown, right? So this is Elizabeth I's relative, James I and the first of England and the 6th of Scotland. And let's say that what we're trying to do here is we're going to do a settlement in Virginia at Jamestown. So what are we trying to do here? What's an intended benefit?
They want to get a stake in the new world like Spain has.
Yeah, I was going to say establish a colony.
Yeah. Okay. What's another intended benefit? Well, let's go through this quickly, so because I think get gold like Spain had gold was top on their mind, wasn't it? What's the cost they knew they were going to incur?
The expense of funding the trip.
Yeah.
Risk of people dying on the way to the new world.
Yeah, expected mortality, because I think an unintended cost would be the really high mortality from different things.
Yeah. That people knew about. Okay. What were some unintended costs that they encountered once they got to the New World?
Extraordinarily high mortality.
And what were some reasons for that?
Starving time, malaria, polluted water. Oh, and they've also discovered that it was one of the worst droughts in history during that time that affected the crops.
There's probably some down here in the chat. Destruction of natives, keeping colonies supplied. No knowledge of farming in Virginia. Let's not forget this one. There was no gold. It was supposed to be everywhere. What did they end up growing that allowed it to become eventually profitable?
Tobacco.
Yeah. Okay, so if you have been perplexed in the past as to how to use decision-making models in history, these are two ways you can do it. The simple cost-benefit analysis you can use all the time, and you should. The costs and benefits with including the unintended ones allows you to look at a little more directly at contingencies and uncertainties. There's a couple more you can use. You can also use what's called a decision tree, which we have here. So a decision tree, and this is from an elementary resource, which is why it has smiley faces and things, is actually just two cost-benefit analyses side to side, where you have the decision up here at the top, you have what's the choice we need to make, and then you have two distinct things. Let's say that my choice is go to the institute or do chores at home. You could say go to the institute, get recertification points, get curriculum, get new ideas, connect with other teachers. Bad points are, I've been on Zoom so much already. You don't put your house chores here as an opportunity cost because you put that over there. I've been on Zoom so much already, I might be bored. What if the lessons aren't any good? And then you say, go to institute here. Oh, I'm sorry. They do this different. They did this upside down from what I do. What's the problem? Choice one, choice two. And then at the top, you would actually choose. Over here, you would put stay home and do housework. You know, would make my spouse happy, would make me feel more comfortable, is too much work. The school year might be more difficult. Here's another way you can have it is, here's another decision tree where you can see, this is upside down from the other one. This one is what should I produce, but what is my choice? You have two options, and it's basically two cost benefit analyses side by side from each other. And you use this when you have a really distinct two different choices you could do. I could do this or I could do that. And then you line up the cost benefit analysis right by each other. Okay, the last decision-making model you could possibly make could be a paste diagram. So paste is actually the next page here, where you define the problem, P, it's list alternatives, A, list criteria, C, evaluate the solutions, E, and make a decision. And it just looks like this. Paste decision grid. Now, let me show you a resource you can use for this to find it in the future. Is if you go to the Virginia Council on Economic Education website and go here to any grade K5, 6, 8, or 9, 12, and go to economic decision making, we've made resources for you on this. Look, using a cost benefit decision grid or using a paste grid. Let's do the introduction to how to do paste.
Economic decision-making skills for the middle and high school classroom using a paste grid decision-making model. Why should you use a decision-making model in your classroom? First, we can use it to analyze the outcomes of the decisions that people have already made, so we can better understand the choices that people faced in the past. And we can use a decision-making model for future decisions to see a problem from a variety of perspectives and consider the consequences before the choice is made. This video will demonstrate how to use a PACE decision-making model with your students. A PACE decision-making model is a tool to use when deciding among various choices or alternatives. Use this tool to consider the costs and benefits of each alternative or choice using factors or criteria that are most important to you. I'm going to demonstrate how a PACE grid works from the student's perspective. Our decision, Which college should you attend? You've decided on an economics major, you filled out your applications, and you've been accepted at your top 3 choices for college. Those choices are Big City U, small private college, and elite university. But you're having a very difficult time making a choice, and you need some help with this decision. So how do you decide? The word PACE is a reminder of the steps that you should take to help you make a decision. P, A, C, E, and D. First, you want to identify the problem. Next, you want to list your alternatives or the choices that you have. You need to state the criteria, decide what's most important to help you make this decision. What do you value? Then you want to evaluate the criteria based on those alternatives. Then what you need to do is decide. Whenever you use a decision-making tool, you must include an intentional analysis of what is given up when you make a choice. So after each decision, you want to ask, what is my opportunity cost? What am I giving up? Let's work our way through a PACE decision grid. First, we're going to state the problem. Which college should you attend? Next, you want to list your alternatives and choices. Big City U, small private college, and elite university. Next, you need to identify or state the criteria. This is what you consider to be important in helping you make a decision. People often differ in the criteria that they consider most important in making a choice. But the criteria that you want to list is what you consider to be important in helping you make your decision. Your most important criteria are these. Low cost tuition, because your family is not wealthy and you don't want to take out a lot of loans. Your next criteria is you want a high quality education, particularly in the field of economics. And last, you want to be close to home because you would miss your family and your friends if you were far away. Next, we need to evaluate the alternatives based on the criteria that we've just listed. We're going to rate our alternatives on a scale from 3 to 1. 3 would be that it meets the criteria the best, and 1 would mean that it does not meet the criteria. So let's look at our 3 college choices. Big City University is a large...
And take note that you don't have to be 1 through 3. You can make any scale that you want. And in some cases, if you have one particular criterion that's especially important to you, you can give that one more points or a heavier weight.
University with 30,000 students at the large classes, scholarships, so the costs for the economist teach home. So now we've evaluated.
So as you can see, I've skipped ahead to there. So she thinks that close to home is really big and important. So she's given that a 3. And this high quality education from elite and small both get a 3. So she's going to add up the points so that she can get some sort of a measure of what's important to her.
The alternatives. Let's add up the numbers. Big City U gets a 7. Small private college also ranks a 7. And elite university received a 5. Now we have a problem because Big City U and small private college are both ranked the same with a 7. So now what should I do? You need to understand that maybe one criteria might be more important than the others. So for me, that criteria is high quality education. I'm going to give that a higher ranking or more emphasis than the other 2 criteria. So to be able to reflect that on the chart, I'm going to times those numbers by 2. So Big City University goes from a 2 to a 4. Small private college goes from a 3 to a 6. And elite university also goes from a 3 to a 6. So let's take a look at those numbers again. Big City U gets a 9. Small private college gets a 10, and elite university gets an 8. So we've evaluated the criteria, and last is D, make a decision. So according to my decision grid, small private college is where I should be going to college. That's my decision. Now it's important to remember that this is my decision. Your decision might be different. Your numbers might be different, and that's okay. Because filling out a decision grid isn't about getting the correct numbers. It's about the process. And this is what you want to emphasize with your students. There's no right or wrong to the numbers.
And of course, and then she's going to tell you that the opportunity cost is going to be choice number 2, which is going to be Big City U, which gets a 9. Okay, let's apply that. You know what? I owe you all a break. So we're already missing the agenda by a little bit, but I'm a little okay with that because I know that doing the decision-making models can be really tricky, and it's something that I really want to make sure that we do and do well. So we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll go through a paced decision-making model together, and then we will go on to our little lesson demos that we have for various lessons in virtual economics. Any questions? Okay, so let's take a 7-minute break and come back at, well, no, let's give you full 10 minutes, okay? Give you full 10 minutes, we'll come back at 11:04, all right? Okay, enjoy your break. Let's start with this medieval guild lesson by having different readers read The Rules of the Hatters of London. All right, can Bridget, would you be willing to unmute yourself and read us the introduction to the top material and then rule number 1, okay? And then I'll call on other people for rule number 2. Actually, then let's do Felicia for number 2.
The rules are accepted by Thomas Leahy, Mayor of London, at the request of the Hatters of London.
Felicia, would you read number 1, please?
In the first place, 6 of the most lawful men of the hatter's trade shall be assigned to be wardens. They will rule and watch the trade in the same way that wardens rule and watch other trades.
Jenna, number 2, please. And then Juliana, number 3.
Also, that no one shall make or sell any manner of hat within the city if he is not free and from the same city. If anyone is caught violating this rule, he must give up the hats that he made or offered for sale.
Also, that no one shall be made apprentice in the hatter's trade for a term of less than 7 years. Anyone who receives an apprentice in any other manner shall lose his freedom until he buys it back again.
Okay, let's do Madeline, could you do number 4, Chad number 5, and Patricia number 6?
Also, that no one in the hatter's trade shall take any apprentice if he is not himself a freeman of London.
Chad. Lost him.
Also, that the hatter's trade shall search all the hats that are for sale in the area as often as need be, and the warden shall have the power to take any hats that they find defective and bring them before the mayor of London so that those causing the defects found may be punished.
Also, some workmen in the trade have made hats that are not high quality, and this deceives the common people and brings great scandal, shame, and loss to the good folks of the hatter's trade. Therefore, no workman in the trade shall do any work by night, but only in the clear daylight, when the wardens may openly inspect their work. Anyone who does otherwise shall pay a fine to the chamber of the Guildhall for the first and second offense, and the third time he shall lose his freedom.
Okay, so this is adapted from the articles of the Hoymers and the Hatters from the source book of London history. They made a choice here to adapt the language. And if you're doing inquiry work, I know a lot of times, kind of, if you want to be a bit more of a purist, you actually have the direct language that's not excerpted. So I think this is kind of excerpted, but they decided to make it more readable for the kids. But it is very close to being a pure primary source. Okay, so we're going to have to use the rules of the Hatters Guild here as we divide up into teams to make our hats, okay? Now, here's what we'll do. I'm going to put you into groups. Now, in each group, you're going to have to pick, I'm going to divide you up into groups of, I need to double check how many people are on the call here. How many do we have? 15, 16, 17, 18? Okay, so I'm going to divide you into groups of 3. And one of you has to be a farmer, because we're not all hatters, y'all. We're just not everybody is a hatter. 2 people can be hatters. And we're going to see which group can make the most hats. All right. Now, one thing we can do is I'm going to give you just a minute to think about a strategy. So one thing you could do is you could cheat on the rules, and the farmer could be allowed to hat. Whatever the case, I want to see the farmer. It's your job. Your job should be to cut out strips. Okay, so we're going to need to see some farming done in strips. But I'm not going to give you any bonus points for. I'm not going to give you any bonus points or any points for food strips cut, because really this is a hatting activity. You can also decide how you're going to make the hats, and you can decide how you're going to communicate it. You're going to decide, and then you're going to get going on making the hats. How do you make the hats, y'all? Does anybody know? Oh, well, guess what? There's a hint, is that it shows you right there in the lesson plan, and the lesson plan is in the Google Classroom, which is about having to do with the knowledge of how to do it, which is provided by the guilds. And so I gave you not very much time to go look, because you know what? I wanted to hurry you up and see who could do this the fastest, all right? So I'm going to give you 3 minutes to make hats. Ready, set, go. Your rooms are open. 3 minutes starting right now. Who can make the most hats?
Group 2, and we made 15 hats and like 25 strips of paper.
Oh, 15 hats and a bunch of strips of paper. Okay. Let's hear from some more.
I was in group 6 and we made 17 hats and we have 60 plus pieces of paper.
Okay.
Group 4, and we had 14 hats.
My group had 15 hats. Was it group 3? Yeah,
Group 3.
Felicia, your group was the one that had to learn how to make the hats. Was that where we were struggling to find the lesson plan?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So let's do some. Did I miss anybody? Okay, let's get some takeaways from this right here. So look back. Let's look back at the rules of the hatters. And your students might need a bit more guidance on this, but let's look at some of these rules here and see how they correspond to some of the ways that we made the hats. So first off, this warden thing. Was there a warden in this activity?
You.
Oh yeah, what did I do?
Popped in.
I tried to be
Raid.
a raid.
Did us.
I tried to be intimidating. That's why I was like, boo, who's making unlawful hats? Okay, yeah, so there was a warden. I was the warden. What about number 2? No one shall make any hats if he is not free or of the same city. What is, did that correspond to this activity at all? Not really
Didn't
so
even
much.
check. I'm assuming.
You had to be in your group, I guess.
Oh, because a lot of
Okay,
us from different cities.
Yeah.
Well, you couldn't very well move from group to group on my Zoom call. So we didn't really have an apprentice either. But look, no one shall be an apprentice for less than 7 years. So in order to be a hatter, a full hatter, you have to be one for 7 years. You can't corner cut this. Do you think that some people would try to cut corners on this?
That was our problem.
Tell me about that.
We had beginner hat makers. I was one. I made an inferior hat, I will admit.
Yeah, and one of the important things about this activity is that is that you have to throw out inferior hats, which is easier to do in person. But y'all, can we get a little honesty here for a moment? Let me pull this. Let me make it so I can see everybody and look you right in the eye. Does anybody have a hat that you think might be inferior? Hold it up. Okay, yeah. Actually, a couple of these don't look so, oh yeah. These aren't so bad. You all are very, very honest, actually. Yeah, I think in general you have pretty good hats. But they really thought that hat quality was a real issue. Did you hear the strong language they used to talk about the hat quality? What did they say exactly?
They said don't work at night, they're limited hours.
Yeah.
And defects are punishable.
They said it brought shame on the whole industry.
Yes, scandal, shame, and loss to the good folks of the trade.
Yeah, and it deceives the common people.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't have tape.
Language. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
We didn't have tape.
Okay, there's no tape. Yeah, that would be very helpful, wouldn't it?
This is the same language they use for counterfeiting today, essentially, or intellectual property.
Yeah, well, and actually, you know, there's a lot of connections to this too today.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it might start to become a little bit clear here. When else do you get, well, I mean, how much of a problem is it that, like, there needs to be a nationwide guild that makes sure that hats are up to quality? Doesn't that sound like it's often kind of like central planning for a medieval society? You know what's going on here is it's protectionism. What you've got is the guild that is trying to lock out competition. And we hear this a lot too when we talk about issues of international trade, right? Cheaply made foreign products. And we talk about the quality of it, and it's largely because of this same thing right here, is that we kind of have a domestic workforce that we try to protect. And so what you have here is the guild is not just making stuff just for the consumers, are they? They're making stuff also to protect their own interests as guild members. And that's a big deal for the producers back then. Most of the stuff that was made back then was made by a guild. And so you couldn't just have somebody set up a hat shop and sew hats. Think about it. You're back in medieval times, and a woman can't sit in her house and sew a hat and sell it. She's not allowed. It has to be done by someone who's spent 7 years of training before they're allowed to make hats as an independent hat maker. So you can't take an apprentice unless the person is a free man of London. Got to be trained for 7 years. And the wardens can search the area as often as need be to find defective hats, find people who aren't a free person for long enough, and to make sure that people are not doing hat making work outside the guild. So what do you think the effect that has is on the production of hats? Well, let's look at it differently. There was one of you in each group that was a farmer, right? What if we didn't have a guild? What if we let that person make hats? What would have happened then?
Lousy hats.
Yeah.
That third person in your group would have been the one to make the lousy hats, do you think?
Maybe, maybe not. Because the person may not know that they have a propensity for hat making because they've been put into farming, it doesn't mean they're the best at it necessarily, especially when you consider a lot of people just did what their parents did or their grandparents did. So it actually made, like on the couture end, like they could be better hats, but it takes the farmer away from farming.
Yeah, so you're exactly right. And what I neglected to do and what I should have done is you should assign which person it is the farmer, right? So Felicia has had experience making hats before, and that might have been the only thing that got group 1 off the ground because they couldn't find the hat making instructions, right? They didn't have a master to instruct them. If Felicia had been assigned to be the farmer, then they would have had no one in the group who knew how to make the hats, right? And if you assign at random, or you know what, and teachers, you know your students. Like if there's an artistic kid in the group, you can make that kid be the farmer, and they're going to be frustrated because they want to be the one making the hats. And this is a way that you can really kind of undercut the productive power of the group. Because what you see here is the hats, the guilds are able to share information about how to make the hats. But while you talking in groups, it can help you be more productive and learn how to do it. And that increases hat productivity and increases quality. But notice there's some anti-competitive and anti-productive stuff here, in that you have some people that are locked out of hat making. They haven't been an apprentice for long enough. They're not in the guild. They're not allowed to make hats. And most of the stuff that was made back then would have been made by some guild or another, and it really restricted what people could wear. And in the Middle Ages, people tried to get around these all the time. And, you know, they were trying to make hats in their own houses because they wanted a hat or they wanted boots. And the black market, says Jackie. And you had these wardens going around trying to hunt them to make sure that they weren't making stuff illegally. So when Adam Smith wrote in 1776, The Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations, Madeline says that's overregulated and overkill. That's exactly what Adam Smith said, because he came into a world where most of the stuff that you consumed was made by some monopoly or other, right? And so that's all what these guilds are. They're little monopolies. And you had the East India Company was a monopoly, monopolizing overseas trade. The Navigation Acts made sure that everything came through London. That was anti-competitive. You had guilds upon guilds upon guilds. Everything was made by some monopoly or another. And so it was more radical than you think for Adam Smith to say, you guys, why don't we let people trade freely and create stuff freely? Of course, the guilds would say, kind of like what we say today, well, quality will be shot. Our industry is going to be destroyed. It's going to wreck all of our manufacturers. But Smith predicted otherwise in The Wealth of Nations and said, no, because competition is going to be the regulator of quality and profit is going to be the motivator. And you're actually going to have more production and at least as good quality. So there you go. It's lunchtime. Any questions before we go to lunch about the guild lesson?
I was just thinking a way to build in that idea of the 7-year apprenticeship is with your class, you could say like anyone under age 13 can't make hats. Like you can put like an age limit on who can make it as well.
That's perfect. Thank you. Yeah. Everybody write that down. That was a good one. Any other comments or questions?
Well, there's also the fact that, and I know in Nelson we have kids that apply for the UVA apprenticeship program. There's still apprenticeships in a lot of trade fields, and people that go through an apprenticeship program usually can command a much higher wage than people that don't. And we have a number of people that have gone through the UVA program, but that's, you know, it's still around, though we don't have the guilds necessarily, but the apprenticeship style is still there and is still a big draw.
Yeah, and we have licensing too. Yeah, so, you know, there are apprenticeships and then there are apprenticeships, right? You have apprenticeships where it's, you actually are trying to teach people the skills, and that's the main point of it. You have some of them where it's kind of a balance, but you have some where they're really just trying to lock people out of the industry. And the most extreme example of this is fast food non-compete clauses. Madeline says, it drives workers' wages down to have free enterprise, unregulated. Well, what it drives, it drives wages in nominal terms down, but it drives down the cost of the products even more. Another way of saying that is it controls cost. And so when you do have a free market for this stuff, it generally increases people's buying power and real wage. So a big issue nowadays that's relevant to this is during the 2000s and the recovery of the Great Recession, if you worked at like McDonald's, you had buried way down in the fine print of your contract that if you quit, you could not immediately go work at Burger King, right? They had non-compete clauses built into that because the fast food companies hated when, they didn't like competing for workers. And so they made it so that these non-compete clauses meant that they could pay people less because people weren't allowed to negotiate their wage up by going from restaurant to restaurant. That was kind of a scandal because it had really no bearing on the quality of fast food. It was just a way to support the companies. There's debate as to, so how is that adjudicated in the real world? You get taken to court, you get, or told, in fact, I'd be really interested to see a Planet Money episode on someone that got taken to court for breaking a non-compete clause for how that happened. I would like to see some real world reporting on that, and I haven't seen it. There's questions as to whether cosmetologists should be licensed, right? I mean, you can wreck somebody's hair, you are dealing with chemicals, but we have, in the 2000s, we had a proliferation of jobs that you need to be licensed for. Barber's license, cosmetology license, lots of licenses for things that you probably can figure out and learn, but when the license, it keeps you from joining the industry, and that keeps people who are in the industry from having to compete, which keeps prices higher for consumers. And so this guild stuff is still relevant today. However, I have kept you into lunchtime, and nobody likes that. So we're pushing the day back 10 minutes, come back at 1:10, and Twyla Kitts from the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts is going to be working with you with their education resources. Okay? Have a great lunch. See you at 1:10.
Thank you. It was a great morning.
Stephen, can we log off just because I know where I live?
Oops, that's the wrong one.
I just started re-recording. Twyla Kitts from the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts.
Come on. There we go. So I am just delighted to see everyone today. How many of you have actually been to the Virginia Museum? So a lot of you? Yeah, a fair amount of you. I can't see you all at the same time, but I'm kind of scrolling through. So it really is a phenomenal museum, and it actually is one of the top 10 in the entire country. And that's not just my opinion, as I like to say, but that's the opinion of the American Alliance of Museums. And it's really gorgeous here right now. The gardens are just stunning. So today we're going to, I wonder if I can admit someone. Let me see. Yes, apparently I can. So that's great. Today we are going to, I can get my controls to work here. We're going to consider exactly how much a Fabergé Imperial Easter egg is worth. Because that has economic implications, right? Everybody think that? So everybody, you want to throw into the chat how much you think a Fabergé Imperial Easter egg is worth? $10, $10 million, 7 million, 50 million. 50 million is 800,000. Depends on the egg. That's very true, Madeline. 1 million plus, 10 million. All right, all right. What someone is willing to pay? 10 million. Awesome. All right. Well, we're gonna have a little adventure with the eggs here. Each of you is going to have 2,000 units of purchasing power for for this opportunity to own this very Fabergé egg. So, and I thought these were considerable units of purchasing power. This is a 500 ruble note from 1912 featuring Emperor Peter the Great, and that seemed very appropriate since it's the Peter the Great egg we're looking at. And then 1917, George Washington and Columbus and Clue sighting land. Why do you think I picked 1917? And you can either unmute or throw it in the fall of the Romanovs. Absolutely.
Assassination.
Yeah, right. So it just seemed fitting somehow. And also, I thought it's really interesting how both of these forms of currency are also kind of propaganda. You know, that's a really good way of getting your face and message out there to whatever land you're in. So this also might give you an opportunity to discuss things like exchange rates and the varying purchase power of specific currencies. For example, when I was in the Soviet Union in 1983, I neglected to turn in any of these currencies. So now what they are souvenirs, because you can't actually spend with them anymore. So, and I was also thinking about, as I was working with this, Stephen's ways of economic thinking. And I thought particularly in this adventure that we should think about the consequences of choice that lie in the future, because we're going to take a journey back into the past. We're going to give you several opportunities to bid or make an offer for this imperial Easter egg. And really, any fine arts auction house provides information about the object on order. And I actually wanted to show you this picture of Wartsky because they specialize specifically in Carl Fabergé. So they, the employees and owners of Wartsky are actually the world's foremost authorities on the buying and selling in Fabergé. There are also, of course, lots of other experts as well. So let's actually give you a little background, because you know that's what all auctions would start with, kind of an ad for selling. So you might want to think about pros and cons as we look at this. So there are only 50 imperial Easter eggs that were commissioned from the Fabergé firm and delivered to the last 2 czars of Russia, and 7 are still missing. So think about that. You might be able to find one of the Fabergé eggs. What would that be like? 2 more were ordered and made for 1917, but never delivered. But they're not worth as much because they were never delivered. So there's a big controversy among Fabergé enthusiasts as to whether they're legitimately imperial Easter eggs or not. And I think there's even a question about whether or not the Karelian birch is actually the real one. I think they pretty much proved that the constellation is one of those that were not delivered. So the presentation of these eggs began in 1885 when Alexander III presented this hen egg, or the first hen egg, to his wife Alexandra Feodorovna. And actually it was probably because she was a little bit depressed because Alexander II, Alexander III's father, had been assassinated, and she was there, you know, watched him bleed to death. So this was to cheer her up. And apparently she loved it. It was a great hit. So he decided to continue to do that every year thereafter. So, and of course, his son, Nicholas, continued that, but he gave them both to his wife and his mother each year. So now the czars are commissioning the egg, but it's actually Fabergé and his workmasters who decide on the theme and appearance of the eggs, although sometimes they had sort of advisors who were part of the imperial family to give them a hint about what might work out well. But for 1903, it was the 200th anniversary of the founding of St. Petersburg. So Fabergé really felt like he needed to pull out all the stops. So on one side of that, you can see the miniature portrait of Nicholas II on this side of the egg. And then on the other, there's a miniature portrait of Peter the Great, founder of the city. And this egg is made of red, green, and yellow, gold, and platinum, translucent yellow and opaque white enamel. And this is from one of the advertisements for the egg. Scores of rubies, hundreds of diamonds, rock crystal, and watercolor on ivory. And I think you can really see the intricate design on this. The bulrushes are sort of a biblical symbol of the River Jordan, and the Russians sort of associated the River Neva, which is in St. Petersburg, with the River Jordan as well. The other two sides feature miniature paintings of the wooden hut, the first structure of the city that Peter the Great is said to have built with his very own hands, and then the Winter Palace, which today is the Hermitage. And they painted it sort of a green now, so you might not recognize it in that little watercolor there. But you can see the two dates, 1703 and 1903. There were celebrations all through St. Petersburg and actually all through Russia for this amazing event. So the very top features the diamonds that form the entwined initials of Nicholas and Alexandra. You can see the Russian N looks like an H, and then the A for Alexandra right there, and the little second for Nicholas II. And then the double-headed imperial eagle is on the bottom. One of the things that Fabergé did particularly well was to finish every single surface of the entire object. His little animals, even the bottoms of their feet, are completely realistically rendered. So they were things that were meant to be held in your hands, to be actually opened and played with. They were really elegant. So inside, and almost all of them had a surprise inside. So inside, when you open the top, up rises this miniature statue of Peter the Great. And it's based on a real statue that was commissioned by Catherine the Great in 1782. It's also known as the Bronze Horseman, and it's one of the most famous symbols of St. Petersburg. It stands in Senate Square today. And that name comes from this famous poem about the statue called The Bronze Horseman, which was written by Alexander Pushkin, often called the Russian Shakespeare, one of the greatest poets who's ever lived. The statue is by a French sculptor named Falconet. This is a line from The Bronze Horseman by Pushkin. See the bronze horseman comes, bestriding the charger, clanging in his flight. And in the poem, the bronze horseman actually comes to life, and he chases the hero of the poem through the streets of St. Petersburg. It's very compelling. This is an illustration from one of the many publications of this. And Alexandre Benoit was a fairly well-known artist, including doing many of the set designs and costume designs for the Ballet Russe. And here, this picture, you can see the base on which that statue sits is the largest stone base that's ever been moved into a position like that in the world. It's pretty incredible. So all of these things are adding to the cultural significance of this egg. And I feel like you should be really excited about the opportunity to make a financial offer on this. So we also have documentation that it was illustrated in the Russian magazine Stolitsa I Usadba, which I believe is Town and Country, and produced and described in the 1939 issue of the Connoisseur. These 3 pages are all the sort of the advertising of the gentleman who eventually sold it to Mrs. Pratt. So we know a lot about this egg. So initially the Fabergé firm presented a bill to the Tsar for 9,760 rubles. The average annual salary in Russia in 1900 was 33.4 rubles. So that meant that an average wage earner would have had to work for 296 years with no expenses to be able to afford this egg. Translated into 2014 dollars, the Tsar paid about $130,542 for this egg. So that's kind of what it was worth in terms of both rubles and working hours in 1903. So I think that gives you kind of an idea of what maybe you should offer for it. So this imperial Easter egg, along with all of the other imperial eggs presented to Alexandra Feodorovna, were left behind when the Romanov imperial family went into exile. All of her eggs that the new officials could find were sent to the Armory Palace in Moscow by Kerensky's government. But these and many others belonging to the Tsar's mother were transferred to the Sovnarkom, the Council of People's Commissars, in February or March of 1922. However, some of the eggs presented to Maria Feodorovna mysteriously went missing from the groups of eggs that they think were housed in the Anichkov Palace. So what if the same thing had happened to the Imperial Peter the Great Easter egg? So the year is 1918, and you are one of what is called the former people. You're a Russian aristocrat. You're seeking to leave Russia for a safe haven in Europe. You have some assets in Paris and London, but most of your wealth came from your landed estates, which have been seized by the local peasants and redistributed. You know that you're going to need more money in the future. So you have an opportunity right now to offer a sum of money for the Imperial Peter the Great egg, which you could sell in Europe. So how many of your 2,000 units of purchasing power are you going to risk? Please keep track of your spending and any gains or losses that result. So put your offers into the chat. The highest offer or the first 5 bids wins the egg. 2,000 for Madeline. Nothing from Nathan Morrison. 2,000 from Donna Schrum. 5,000. Well, you only have 2,000. All right, let's take a look at the first 5. So it looks like Madeline and Donna are, oh, 1,500. Okay. It looks like Madeline and Donna are tied. So you two are tied for that egg. Kind of keep track of what monies you have, because the rest of you who didn't win the bid don't have to subtract anything. However, you were almost caught leaving the country, but you managed to catch the very last diplomatic train headed to the city of Riga in Latvia. You only managed to take 1 suitcase and the egg must stay behind. So you're wiped out, you guys who actually won that bet. And the reason that I picked that escape route is that that's actually how Carl Fabergé escaped from Russia. He died later, about 2 years later, in Lausanne, Switzerland in 1920. His wife and one of his sons actually managed to walk across Finland and get out, and they met him in Switzerland. 2 of his sons were actually caught and ended up having to stay in the Soviet Union. So in 1927, after exchanging hands several times, this Imperial Peter the Great Easter egg ends up among 16 eggs returned by the Foreign Currency Fund of the Narkomfin, the finance ministry, to the Armory. And the Armory, of course, was the huge building and area in the Kremlin where many of the arms were originally kept. So we're going to trade eggs for tractors now. By the late 1920s and 1930s, the Soviet government needed ready money to support their program of rapid industrialization. So they decided that they would sell many of the things belonging to the old nobility and aristocracy, who they still were calling the former people. They decided they would sell them, and the Peter the Great egg was one of the items that they decided to sell. So they were supposed to raise cash by selling selected Tsarist era works of art. So now you have another opportunity. How many of your units of purchasing power will you risk this time? So the highest offer is the first 3 bids wins this egg. So it looks like 500, 100, 100, 1,000, 1,000. Let's see, the first 3 bids. I think we're looking at from Stephen on. 500, 1, 2. So it looks like Jenna, is it Gubbles? How do you say your name, Jenna?
Gubbles.
You have won the bid. However, you run into trouble at the US Customs Office. You have to abandon the egg. And the Soviets had really hoped to sell the egg to wealthy American captains of industry, but they were really looking at the people like the Gilded Age millionaires. But because of the stock market crash and the Great Depression, many of those people didn't have money anymore. So there was a whole new generation of rich that came from a very different time and place. So Armand Hammer, Armand Hammer is a very curious fellow. He supposedly traded his pencil factory in Russia for all of these eggs. Of course, now that we can look back at some of those records, and also his brother, Armand Hammer's brother, actually published a book kind of giving a lot of background. He was actually probably working as an agent for the antiquariat of the Russian government, trying to get them money. So, and Armand Hammer, his father, was once the head of the American Communist Party. So he really is named after the Armand Hammer of the logo of the Soviet Union, which I think is really kind of interesting. So supposedly the antiquariat sold this egg to an American buyer for 4,000 rubles. We don't really know how that is, which is about $2,000. But we think that probably they thought that Armand Hammer could get more of that. So what he did was he tried to sell all of the things that he brought back in department stores in the United States, because that's where he thought that many of the newly rich ladies would come to buy. Lord and Taylor department store was had whole sections where he would have his Russian goods for sale, which is where Mrs. Pratt first ran across a Russian, it was a fork that she bought first Russian imperial fork. And from there, she ended up with 5 imperial eggs, which I think is really kind of amazing. So in November 1936, Alexander Schaefer, who was a dealer in Russian works of art, paid off the import duties and gained the egg. And he has a really kind of wonderful history of selling Russian works of art that came out of Russia after the revolution. And actually the firm is still going on, run by his son. So now he is offering the Imperial Peter the Great Easter egg for sale. It's 1942 and World War II has ended, but your income taxes have greatly increased. So you have to think about how much money you have. How much will you offer for the egg now? Offers in the chat. Okay, all right, Elizabeth, I see yours. Okay, Elizabeth, Julie, and Jean. Okay, I think, oh, very good. It looks like Jean has it. Nope, Elizabeth, let's see. Elizabeth, 1,500. It looks like Elizabeth Wenrick wins the bid. Elizabeth, where are you? Tell us about this.
Yeah.
So are you feeling good about that?
Let's see what happens.
Actually, you're in pretty good shape because even though you don't get the egg, you don't lose any purchasing units. Because Mr. Schaefer decides to sell the egg to Mrs. Pratt because she's been one of his best customers for many, many years. So her husband was actually John Lee Pratt, who actually is a native of Fredericksburg, Virginia. And they bought a house there and were very active with the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts from even actually before the first doors opened. So he actually met her when she was out in Tacoma on the West Coast, and she was a secretary. And he took one look at her. And by the way, by that time, he was working for General Motors and actually DuPont before that. So he was a kind of a man on the rise. He came from really not very much money at all. Got a degree in engineering from the University of Virginia, and then went into business, which is where he made his fortune. He took one look at her and decided that he wanted to marry her, but he said that he had to have $200,000 before he'd ever propose for someone. So he went away and he made way more than $200,000. He came back years later and proposed to her. It took him a while to convince her, but she finally married him. They moved to the East Coast and eventually ended up in Fredericksburg again. And so her, he actually settled some funds on her, and so she had her own her own money, I guess you would say, investments and things of that sort, to spend on things like Russian Easter eggs. So this was one of the latest things that she bought over about 10 to 15 years of collecting Russian imperial objects and actually Russian decorative arts in general. So she wanted to buy this egg, even though Alexander Schaefer very honestly told her that the asking price was 10 times what he paid for it. So she paid $16,500 for the eggs in installments between February 2nd, 1942 and December 1st, 1944. So Mrs. Pratt's letter of December 4th, 1945 gives us a clue, and we have this letter in her own handwriting, you can see here. She says, "My dear Mrs. Schaefer," actually, Mr. Schaefer was actually under the weather right now, so his wife was helping out. "So herewith my check for $285 in full payment of account. Thank you and Mr. Schaefer for your kindness. A great weight is off my shoulders. Tell Mr. Schaefer I will pay for the globe flower and paper cutter as soon as I can. My income tax on the 15th will leave me a very small balance for December. Kindest regards, sincerely yours, Lillian T. Pratt." So how many of you, take a guess in the chat as to what percentage of her income tax the federal government was taking in 1945? Okay, I'm seeing 87, 70, 50, 90, 25. All very good guesses. Let's find out. So the federal income tax was first collected in 1913. And during much of World War II, the top rate was around 73%, so some good guesses there. But in 1944 and 45, the top rate on taxable incomes of over 200,000 peaked at 94%. I know, Donna, I can see you going, wow, yeah, that seems enormous, but why do you think it was so high? Anybody have an idea? And you can unmute yourself if you want. We're not a very big group. Okay, Madeline, yeah, and Catherine, talk to us about it.
Well, I mean, I think you're in 1945. Well, we were in the middle of World War II.
Yeah.
And ending World War II, so that was costly.
Yeah, it pretty much was paying for the war debt. Kind of, and also I think a lot of the support that had gone into the recovery of the country after the Depression.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, lots of things going on there. So I think you can see how you could end up using this to discuss lots of different things with your students.
Mm-hmm.
So, and by the way, this is the knife the paper knife he was talking about that she was trying to pay for, and the globe flowers. And the little paper knife has an inscription for "Dear Alix from Misha." Anybody have any idea, or do we have any Russian history enthusiasts who know exactly who those people are?
Is Misha and Is Alex going to be Alexander and Misha? No, wait. I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, you're on the right track.
Alexandra and wait, who is Nicholas Romanoff? That wouldn't be Misha.
Well, actually, that's very close. Alex definitely is Alexander, so that's the Empress. And Misha is actually Nicholas's youngest brother, whose actual name is Michael, but he went by Misha.
Okay.
So, and I, you know, my mother actually told me that majoring in Russian history was a silly thing to do. It would never be practical. And let me tell you, I am now the educator assigned to the Fabergé Gallery, and it pays off in spades. It's excellent, which I think is—
Go humanities, right?
That's right. That's right. You never know what's going to end up being useful. All right. So these are Mrs. Pratt's handwritten records of the installment payments that she made between February 2nd, 1942 and December 1st, 1944. So she was watching her pennies, trying to figure out what to do. By the way, the house that they lived in, called Chatham in Fredericksburg, is now owned by the Park Service. And it goes back to Revolutionary times. It's probably the only place in the entire country that both George Washington and Abraham Lincoln have both spent time in. And actually Walt Whitman as well, because it was a hospital during the Civil War. But during the war years, they actually lived in the servants' quarters because they were trying to conserve coal and gas. So doing their part for, and by the way, Mr. Pratt was also one of Franklin Roosevelt's $1-a-year men, one of his great advisors. So do you think that Mrs. Pratt made a good investment? Yay or nay in the chat? Yeah, beautiful sunset, yeah, of the, at Chatham, yes, 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 yes. Yes. Yeah, I think she probably did too, and we are very grateful. Yes, because this is priceless. Yeah, absolutely, when you add the history. Well, sadly, her children did not get this later because the Soviet government seized it and then sold it to probably Armand Hammer and then Schaefer and then Mrs. Pratt. However, Nicholas II's mother, Maria Feodorovna, did manage to bring a few of the eggs out with her. She had been in the Crimea when the war broke out. So yes, I think she did. But let's actually look at this a little bit more. So how could we determine how much the Imperial Peter the Great Easter egg is worth today? So, you know, when we're evaluating a work of art, which the museum can't do because it's against the law, we're state employees, we can't get into the negotiating of numbers. But usually when you're evaluating something, you take into consideration what comparable items have brought at auction or sale. So the latest imperial egg to appear on the market was one of those that had been lost. It was the third imperial egg made for Tsar Alexander III to give to his wife in 1887, listed in 1889 inventory as costing 2,160 rubles. So in 1964, it sold for $2,450, but nobody knew that it was an imperial Easter egg, and that would have made all the difference. So it kind of disappears from sight. So, and then a gentleman is, who actually deals in scrap metal, someplace in the middle of the United States, is actually wandering around in a secondhand store, and he sees this gold clock. And he thinks that he can probably sell the gold for quite a lot of money. So he actually purchased the egg for $14,000. He had no idea what its provenance was. He really thought that he was going to maybe melt it down and get the gold. But he got it home and he was kind of a little bit worried. He was thinking that, well, maybe that's not really, the gold isn't really worth that much. But there was a watch in it. and it looked like it might be an expensive watch. So he Googled a Vacheron Constantin watch, which is what it is. And he was looking to see, and they are very valuable, but not nearly as valuable as the egg. And he ran across a newspaper article about this missing egg. So he sent a picture to Wartsky's, and pretty much the Wartsky representative, Kieran McCarthy, was on the next plane. He was so excited about this. So he went out to somewhere in the Midwest, and this guy still wants to be anonymous. But you can see that when he went into this guy's kitchen, you can see that egg sitting beside a cupcake with chocolate sprinkles. And it supposedly sold to an anonymous private collector for $33 million. So, Kieran McCarthy is, again, one of the great experts on Fabergé in these days. He says that the Bolsheviks had this policy of selling treasure. It's likely that Armand Hammer, who was one of the great American collectors and a Russian sympathizer, bought it, and somewhere along the line it lost its provenance and just traveled through the United States and arrived at a flea market. So McCarthy would not actually confirm or deny how much it was sold for, but he did say that the anonymous finder had received a life-changing amount of money. So all of you guys who bid on the egg were doing the right thing, because this is a pretty nice egg, but compared to our Peter the Great egg, I think we would get much more for the Peter the Great than you would get for this early egg. So, and I just thought you might want to see a picture. Kieran McCarthy is the third fellow over there, and beside him on his right is Mark Schaefer, who is the son of the Alexander Schaefer who sold the egg to Mrs. Pratt. And then Geza von Habsburg, yes, those Habsburgs. He was once, I think, 13th in line for the throne of Belgium. He is also one of the foremost authorities on Fabergé in the United States. And Ulla Tillander Goldenheim is actually a Finnish lady, and she has done much work on all of the Finnish workmasters who work directly for Fabergé, which I think is really kind of neat. And they all contribute to the Fabergé Research newsletter, which is kind of amazing. So who was it that said at the beginning, whatever someone was willing to pay is what this is worth? Let me see, who was that? That was really genius. Felicia Rovenold. Talk to us, Felicia.
I think that's just a standard business model. I just paid for a house. I just recently moved, and it is very, if you are trying to buy a house at the moment, you understand what we're this unique situation, and that was also a very unique time and situation. So people are paying $50,000, $80,000 over asking prices, which are already inflated. So my house is whatever somebody wants to pay for it. So if I had $79 million, I would buy a Fabergé egg.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, it's funny, we actually sent the Fabergé eggs while the museum was closed. It went to the Forbidden City in China, and they were put on view. There was talk of lending it to Russia on the way back. Yes, the Attorney General of the state advised this not. So they didn't go to Russia, and I think that probably was wise, because you never know what's going to happen. You know, possession being 9/10 of the law as well. So yeah, really, really kind of interesting. And I think that could really relate to a lot of the things that you guys have been discussing today about ways of economic thinking. You know, when do you invest? When do you not? When do you think about what's going on in the world? It's funny, I have a financial advisor, and I probably should have followed my own thoughts more than I followed him, because he was insisting that we were going to have huge inflation and I should invest this way. And I kept saying, no, because I don't think that this is, I mean, I think I understood history more than he did. He understood economics more. And I would have much more money today if I'd done what I thought I should have done. Anyway, just neither here nor there, but really interesting to kind of think about that, and how the flow of history and understanding what came before might happen again can really inform a lot, I think. And this is the Fabergé research site, and it's really kind of amazing. There are probably, I would say, as many as 20 or 30 regular subscribers and contributors to this, and they are absolutely obsessed with Fabergé and all of the things that he produced. And they are researching things all the time, and they find out more things. As we were actually reinstalling the Fabergé eggs, there's one called the Imperial Rock Crystal Egg, which has little miniatures of places that were important to Alexandra Feodorovna. I had to rewrite that copy 4 times because they kept finding out that you were wrong about this place, it's this place. So, actually, as we were putting things into the case, I was rewriting the places that those little miniatures represented. So, and this is what they've worked out for the actual provenance or the history of that particular egg. So in 1954, it was actually installed in the museum, and you can see where that's the front door that fronts on Arthur Ashe Boulevard right now, but they used to be right over that in this balcony. That whole installation, by the way, was designed by Director Cheek, Leslie Cheek, and financially supported by John Lee Pratt. And you can see that that's what it looks like today. And on Thursday, we'll take a look at that as well. There's also a place on the website where you can actually get a 360 look at each one of the imperial eggs, and an app that you can download for your phone as well. So this book by Anna Odom and Wendy Salmon gives a lot of information about how Russia's cultural treasures were sold off to finance the rapid industrialization that took place in the 30s and 40s. And that always makes me think that though that probably ultimately was a bad thing for Russia to sell off all of those treasures, that if they hadn't, and they hadn't come into the Second World War, I don't know that we know who would have won that war. So I think it's really kind of interesting when you look at the past, you have to kind of consider all of the things and balance those. And that was really, how did I do for time? That's not too bad. I wasn't quite sure how long this would take. Would love to hear from any of you, would you use this in your classroom? How would you use it? And by the way, I am going to give this whole PowerPoint to Stephen so that you'll have it to download.
You're doing just fine on time.
Excellent. So, Stephen, are you saying we should take a 10-minute break?
Let me see. We're going to 3, 4. Yes, please. That would be good. Let's take 10 and come back at 2:05.
Perfect.
See you all at 2:05, everyone. Okay. Thank you so much, Twyla. And yes, we'll see you soon. And did she? No, she went entirely. I was going to tell her that I've been playing phone tag with the food person who's selling us our meal tickets. Okay, so we've got 1.5 lessons and a tour of virtual economics to do. So let me do your tour of virtual economics, because if you know how to use this, you'll be able to access the lessons. If you don't know how to use it, you won't be able to access the lessons. All right, so we're going to charge on strong till the end. So this is virtual economics. It looks like this when you open it. But let me start from the very, very beginning. At the museum, we're going to hand you a flash drive. If for some reason you can't be at the museum, we'll mail you your flash drive. But we'll hand you a flash drive, and it'll say virtual economics on it. And here's how you load it up. You actually do need to know this. It's not very intuitive. You're going to open your computer and you just got a bunch of drives and everything. You're going to pick VE50, which for me is drive D, but you know, it's your jump drive. So make sure you select that. And then it's going to give you these things. You don't do auto run, assuming that you're using a PC, you do PC. Otherwise, I think, actually, I wonder if auto run, I've never done it on a Mac before, but for me, I go to VE5 Windows and I do this, VE5. In fact, it might actually be the same for Mac as well. So this is what you find is VE5. You got to go inside a folder to get it and to run it. And that's what you double click right there. And then this will pop up. So it's helpful because it has a logo on it, but it's not the only thing that has the logo. So if you click the wrong thing, you might need to try a different logo thing. So if you are trying to teach economic concepts and you're new to it, you can often just go to Browse Basic Economic Concepts, and you can go to Fundamental Econ, and you have decision-making models, cost-benefit analysis, division of labor, specialization. You know, this might be good for if you say, oh man, I just want to teach my kids about trade. You could go here to trade, specialization, interdependence, division of labor, specialization, and they could direct you to that. If you're doing civics, you could go to the property rights section, and so on and so forth. So let's say that I do want to do that. I go to there, and it gives me an overview of why property rights are important in studying econ. It gives you a list of all the lessons in virtual economics that relate to that concept. It gives you some teaching tips, because sometimes you need those teaching tips in the side margins of the textbook, right? So it gives you a couple of those. And then it also connects you, assuming that you're connected to the net, with Econ Ed Link. So it'll find you the Econ Ed Link website lessons there too. And I can show you more of that website, Econ Ed Link, soon. Oh yeah, oftentimes it also has a little video for you here.
As an owner of property in the United States, you have the right to use.
They're not extremely engaging videos, but they're nice for when you're new to an economic concept and you'd like to hear someone else explain it. Then there's a quiz that you can kind of take along with the entire class at the end. So that's how it works if you pick Browse Economics Concepts. However, this is the World History Institute. So we want to find the world history only lessons. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to Browse Economic Lessons and click that. Clear search. Oh, it has an old search for me. So you see there, look in that little box, displaying 1,392 lessons. That's how many lesson plans you have in virtual economics, 1,392. But let's say that I'm not teaching K through 2. So I'm going to click that and get rid of the K2 lessons. And oh man, it's actually working slowly for me right now. I might need to reload it. Okay, I closed it out. Which means I'm going to load my drive. I'm going to go to VE5 Windows. I'm going to click VE5. And it's going to restart for me. And then I'm going to go back to Browse Economics Lessons. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of the K through 2 lessons, and I'm going to get rid of the 3 through 5 lessons. And notice when it does this, it says displaying 1,289 lessons. It got rid of the got rid of all the elementary lessons here, and it's still got about half the lessons left are high school and middle school. And so you can just go straight down it. And let's do a keyword. Let's just do the keyword history. I'm going to be a history teacher. I'm going to click this. It updates the results and finds me 75 lessons. Now, some of this might not be the best search because look, in this very first one, it found you up a lesson about credit history. So it's not about world history or US history, it's credit history. And actually, I think there's going to be a lot of credit history lessons there. But look, it also finds you a lesson you might not have thought about it. Economic Survival, Resources, Production, and Scarcity from a book called Trading Around the World. This is basically a library of economics resource books smushed onto digital. And so it says publication here on the right, that is which publication it came out in. So the credit history ones are in Financial Fitness for Life. This one here is in Trading Around the World. How economic performance from 2000-2009 compares to other periods in US history. That's from a book called Teaching Financial Crises. Manias, Bubbles, and Panics in World History from Teaching Financial Crises. Well, that might be fun. Let's go there. So we're going to click on that. And it gives us a description of the lesson. And it allows us to view the PDF or save it. I find that they actually sometimes don't save well when you just do save. It saves in its like file format but without saving it for PDF. So I usually open it first in order to save it. And you see, here we go. It's the same sort of lesson as our other world history, or as the one I showed you earlier. And they're complete lesson plans. All this stuff. I want to check this one out later. What does it say for this one? Students will participate in activity designed to analyze the features of 5 bubbles, financial panics, and find their similarities. So that would be a good one, actually. I should check that one out for the future. Okay, and we can save that PDF. So let's go back. Notice that there's a bunch of there's a whole US history publication, which is really good. World history publication, which we're going to look at. And then they take you to Econ EdLink. And I'll tell you more about Econ EdLink later. You can search by standard. If you see this tab right here, we're going to click on Virginia. And it's going to align lessons to the standards for the economics and personal finance class. So if you're an EPF teacher, this is really pretty awesome because it'll align to your standards. It doesn't do a standards alignment for every single class, just the econ classes. So you can go through that standards alignment there. However, the function that I find the most useful is to do search by publication. And this is maybe because I'm a bit more familiar with all these books, but if you're, obviously if you're teaching AP Econ, you're going to do that. But for our purposes, I used this book entitled Focus Middle School World History. And you see it right there. And actually, this is a pretty good little section to be at because it also has the Understanding Econ and Civics and Government, which is really good. And then Econ and US History, which is another real good book. By the way, there's a couple people that teach civics and economics here. In 2 weeks, we're going to have a Civics and Economic Institute that's very similar to this one. So please register for that one because we want you to be at that one too. And I'll just put here in the chat vcee.org so you can remember where to go. Is there someone in the waiting room? Oh my goodness. Okay, go to vce.org there to register. That's what you want to do. We're going to click on Focus Middle School World History right there. So it gives you the table of contents. And let's just read through these really fast so you can see all the ones that are available. Out of Africa, why early humans settled around the world, how Neolithic farmers increased their standard of living, the Neolithic agricultural revolution, that's the one that we did with cutting the strips, great civilizations around rivers, entrepreneurs in Mesopotamia, India and the caste system, the Silk Road, Athens and Sparta, Athens and olive oil, the fall of Rome, economic systems of the Incas and Aztecs, Mansa Musa, inflation then and now, Paper money of the Sung, Yuan, and Ming dynasties, the economic systems of medieval Europe, wages in the Black Death, business in the Middle Ages, working in a guild. That's the one that we did. Why didn't China discover the New World? Because they sank all their ships. That's why, on purpose. Christopher, and that's the lesson analyzes that. Christopher Columbus, what's the deal about spices? We're going to look at that in a moment. Columbian exchange, Renaissance banking, mercantilism, and the Midas touch. That one's a pretty neat one because it's about, are you more better off if everything you have is gold? And finally, the two faces of Adam Smith. So you see that there's just a ton of lessons for your world history class right there. And if you click one of them, let's go to the Neolithic one that we did. Actually, no, let's do Mansa Musa. Same thing, you can save, view the PDF, double click. And this one has students compare, it has a little auction where you can auction stuff off in your class and then increase the money supply as you auction things, and then watch what happens to prices. And this is, of course, if you're familiar, based with Mansa Musa's Hajj to Mecca, where he wanted to impress everybody, and with his wealth, and he had gold mines in the Mali Empire, and he threw out so much gold in Egypt, like Aladdin in the movie Aladdin, that it actually debased gold coinage. It caused inflation and decreased the value of gold all over the Mediterranean, which is amazing. So you can read about Mansa Musa there and about prices and inflation here. That's an example of the resources in that book. Just in case you're interested in other books, The Civics and Government is good. It's made, I think, more for 12th grade government classes. So some of the lessons are a bit sophisticated for our civics and government, our civics and economics class, but some of them can be used, and I'll help you with that in the Institute. The U.S. history book is really good. If you teach U.S. history, I highly recommend that you search this to have good inquiry-based lesson plans. But look at the other books that we have that are available. Geography, focus on economics. High school economics book. K through 2 can do math and economics if you teach elementary. Learning, earning, and investing if you teach economics and personal finance. Math and econ. I know David there teaches math. This is another really good one right here. We have one lesson in middle school world geography, focus on econ. So why do people move? What are productive resources? Economic freedom, how important is it? There's a standard on that in your world history class. And then lots about trading around the world.
Which book did you say was the good one for American government?
It's under focus. And if there's a particular topic one, it starts with an F because there's this focus series. So always look under F for focus. This one right here. Focus, understanding economics in U.S. history.
And that's a good one for government?
Actually, it is pretty good for government. Obviously, the understanding economics and civics in government is good for government, especially if it's a standalone government class. Like I said, it can be a little on the sophisticated side for some of your C and E classes, but you definitely can find things that are worthwhile in that book. Another one that's really good for geography and history would be under T, trading around the world. Where did it go? A lot of them. This one right here, trading around the world, and then another one, the wide world of trade. Those are both really good trade-based lessons or lesson plan books. And if you teach economics and personal finance and you find yourself short on insurance lessons and topics, as many people do, if you look under V, you can find virtual economics insurance lessons. And those were made exactly because of what I just said, because people kept saying, I have trouble teaching insurance in my economics and personal finance class. So please do make sure you scroll all the way down to the bottom. If you want a little primer on economics, you can go to What Economics is About. It's a little booklet that's towards the bottom, right next to What Personal Finance is About. And then look, we have one more book, World History, Focus on Economics. And this book is a little older. That's why it had to be superseded by the book I've been pulling lesson plans from. But, you know, it's another whole lesson plan book based on world history. So there you go. The first economic revolution, making clothes, trade in Africa, the Black Death, China, Spain, the tulip boom, Adam Smith. A couple of the lessons I think here are rehashed in the new book, but it's definitely worth looking at. That one you'll just find under W from world history. There's a lot of personal finance books in there, which I'm not going to focus on. This one is pretty solid too, Focus Globalization. You might want to look at that one. That could be relevant for what we do. Okay, any more questions about the content of these? You can and should explore it when you get it. Let me take you over to Econ EdLink. So if you go to the internet and you go to www.econedlink.org, this is the main page for the National Council for Economic Education for its teacher resources. So they're advertising the national conference there. It would be awesome if y'all could make it to that, though it'll be virtual. And if you go here to browse by grade level, there's tons of classroom resources, lots and lots and lots. And so if you go down here to history, there's a lot of US history. We're on a civilizing mission, y'all, to teach everyone that world history is just as good or not better than US history. So we're going to click on apply to resources for all grades, and it will find 77 history lessons for us. Black History Month, racial equity, Black History Month again, the Crusades and the expansion of trade, the Great Depression mystery, Booker T. Washington, 50 Cents in a Dream, which was written by Stephen Day and Lynn Stover. Go see my Booker T. Washington lesson, everybody. And by the way, if you make a really good economics lesson or economics related lesson, you should submit it to VCEE's lesson plan competition, and you can submit it to Econ EdLink too, and I can help you with that. I think they are, unless they've changed it, they pay $300 for every lesson that they publish. So, and it requires a specific format and everything, but it's really worth thinking about. So you can also publish your stuff here as well. So the history of Medicare, et cetera, et cetera. So you really should go here to Econ EdLink to look for lesson plans galore. You can search by economic concept there. You can search for resource type there. There are videos, webinars, lesson plans, articles, and you go by subject here. You can also find inquiry-based learning and Nearpods right there. Or you can search by subject. You can log in and make an account, and that way you can save lesson plans and annotate them as well. And I believe that gives you a discount in their store where you can buy some of those books that were on the virtual economics resource. Whew, I went through that pretty fast. Econ EdLink or virtual economics. All right. Well, hey, that was your tutorial. Can I just give you an alert? Many people in the institutes kind of, your eyes glaze over a bit because I was just showing you how to access stuff. But y'all, the jump drive is really good. I mean, it has 2,000 lessons. It's searchable. It really kind of is the centerpiece resource of what we're handing out to you. They cost $125 each at retail, but you get it for free because you're here at the Institute. So please don't just take the jump drive and throw it in a drawer. You've got to keep it and use it to plan your lesson, plan your units, okay? Promise? Pinky promise? Okay. All right, got your pinky promises. Well, let's bring this down the home stretch with 1.5 lessons, and then we will be out of here. And you can do your asynchronous work. All right. So, what's the big deal with spices? I just want to point out one activity here that we can do together. Okay, so as usual, you get a background on the lesson plan and a procedure. Connection to today. And now, I decided to skip this for now. This could be a little cumbersome, but they have the students find the prices of spices today and convert those into per ounce, and then have them compare how much work, how much income it would cost to buy spices today compared to back then. So if you have a little bit of a mathy activity, that can be worthwhile. But it really shows that spices were a big deal because they were very, very, very valuable. But I want to introduce the idea of supply and demand here. So let's read this lesson with each other, can we? Could I have Madeline, could you read the first paragraph? Elizabeth, would you read the second? And Ross, could you read the third for using the following scenarios? And then Jenna, could you read the supply changes with and demand changes with, okay? All right,
yeah.
Take it away.
All right, determining the market price for spices. Spices are much less expensive today than 500 years ago. Today, the average worker can earn enough money to buy a pound of cinnamon in 45 minutes. In 1439, the average worker needed to work 3 days of labor to earn enough to buy that same pound of cinnamon. Why has the price of spices such as cinnamon fallen so dramatically?
Both buyers and sellers are responsible for determining market prices. Market demand represents the desires of consumers. If the demand for cinnamon increases, the market price of cinnamon is pushed up in the market. If the market demand decreases, the market price falls. But this is only half of the story. Cinnamon suppliers, or businesses, are responsible for the market supply. Market supply represents the willingness of producers to bring a good to market. If the supply of cinnamon increases, it pushes down the market price in the market. If the supply decreases, the market price rises. Let's use cinnamon market and prices from 1439 as an example to see how changes in demand and supply affect the price of cinnamon.
Use the following scenarios from history to complete the chart below. Consider each scenario that follows. Did the event described affect the supply of spices or the demand? According to the event described, was there an increase or decrease in supply or demand for cinnamon? Also indicate what effect this change in supply or demand will have on the market price for spices. Recall the factors that can shift market demand and market supply.
Number of producers, the cost of resources needed to make the good, improved technology and natural events, and demand changes with consumer tastes, number of consumers, increase in consumer income.
Okay, so I kind of like how they've laid these supply and demand changes out easily. In most econ books, they make it a bit more complicated. And this lesson actually has a big, elaborate lesson about this. I think it's enough in this case just to have the students think about what sort of events can change the supply or demand for a product. And since it has examples, it can help the students learn their history. So I'll call on people, if it's okay, by flipping through what I can see on my screen. Jean, would you be willing to read scenario 1 for us? And then we'll talk about whether that affects the supply or demand and whether it increases it or decreases it. Okay, you may proceed.
All right, happy to do so. So scenario one reason spices became so popular in medieval Europe was that buyers began to believe that they came directly from the Garden of Eden. Spices were referred to as splinters of paradise. Ancient authorities claimed that cinnamon and ginger were hauled from the Nile River in nets after washing down from the Garden of Eden. Legend had it that the Garden of Eden was perfumed with spices. Ordinary people tried to recreate a piece of the garden by using spices in their home.
Okay, so question. Will the belief that a product is from the Garden of Eden and therefore a splinter of paradise, will that affect the demand, that is consumers' desire to consume this thing, or will it affect the supply, the ability to produce the thing?
I think it'll affect both, especially if the church is behind it. Because the church was, if this is during, what time period did we say this was?
Well, this is going to kick off the age of exploration. It's going to start in the 1400s and proceed forward.
So the church is still pretty dominant in everybody's lives in Europe. So I would say it would affect it on both ends. People wanting to get it, and then people realizing there's a big profit to be made, trying to do the best to get as much of it to market as possible. That's my opinion.
Now, bear in mind, actually, you know what you've done there is what a lot of our advanced econ students do. And I think what you thought 2 steps down the head of what could happen next and next. We got to take the things one at a time, because there actually is a right answer, and it's just going to be one of the things for each one. Right. But what happens is after the first thing moves, then there's a secondary effect. And I think that you've identified the secondary effect too. Let's start at the primary one. Is this more of a thing that has to do with, now let's go back up to our determinants, okay? Is this having to do with consumer tastes, number of consumers, or income? Or does it have to do with the number of producers, the cost of resources, the technology, or natural events?
I would say consumer tastes, so demand.
Yeah, that's going to be the right answer. That's going to be consumer taste. Consumers hear that they didn't know before, but now they know that spices are splinters of paradise. That's a consumer taste thing. So this is going to be a demand side thing. Now the supply might respond to that later, but it's going to be at first step a demand thing. Europe, you remember at this time, y'all, Europe was really just kind of in the corner, the periphery of the world. I mean, stuff ran through the Middle East, through the Silk Roads, through Persia and everything. That's really where the wealth and information and influence was. And Europeans would get these strange stories just kind of coming through the Muslim world, because remember the spices, they're clear on the other side of the world. So it went through a lot of different big long chain of telephone in order for it to make it to Europe. Okay, during the 1400s, oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be doing this. I should, oh yeah, I'm sorry, I also forgot. So if there's the belief that spices are the splinters of paradise, it's an increase in demand, is that going to increase or decrease the amount of it that people want?
It'll increase the amount they want.
Increase, right? If you think that it's from paradise, you're going to want more of it. And is that going to increase or decrease the price?
It'll increase the price.
Increase it, yeah. So in demand, so here's the thing, in supply and demand, whenever there's a change in demand, both price and quantity do the same thing. They either increase together or they decrease together. That's what's nice about demand. When there's a change in demand, price and quantity do the same thing. Supply, it's the opposite, which makes it confusing. If supply changes, then price and quantity do different things. Price will go up while quantity goes down, or price goes down while quantity goes up. So be ready for that. So during the 1400s, oh, darn it. Nathan, would you read scenario 2 for us, please?
During the 1400s, improvements in sailing technology allowed European sailors to travel on longer and longer journeys. The fast and sturdy caravel, the type of ship Columbus used, was invented. Maps were improved using latitude and longitude, and new tools such as the astrolabe and better compasses improved navigation.
And crucially improved guns, right? Their gunpowder weapons became much more effective as well. So does that have to do with supply, that is number of producers, cost of resources, improved technology, or natural events? Or is that a demand side thing? Tastes, number of consumers, and income? What would you say?
Connected to supply.
Yeah, because of which one of those?
Improved technology, making it easier or cheaper to access spice-producing markets.
There you go. Right. So as we mentioned a second ago, prices. So this is going to bring the price down because they're going to be able to use their technology to access it better, and the amount that they consume is going to go up because they're going to be able to access it better. Okay, good. Got a few more of these scenarios to, oh boy, it's more than I thought. Let's do at least another 2 of them. Okay. Cameron. Is that your last name or is that your first name?
The last name, that's the one that I tend to go by.
Okay. You just
Doesn't
want
matter.
Cameron? Okay.
Cameron or David.
All right. Cameron, please go for number 3 for us.
Spices such as nutmeg and cloves were thought to cure disease. In particular, combinations of powdered cinnamon, cloves, and mace were thought to prevent the Black Death. In Italy, many people walked around carrying bottles of spices for smelling because people thought the plague was spread by bad air. Broth flavored with pepper, ginger, and cloves was believed to prevent disease.
Okay. So is this going to be a demand side thing or a supply side thing? Does that have to do with taste, number of consumers, and income, or is that number of producers, cost of resources, technology, or natural events?
It's going to be consumers, isn't it? Consumer taste.
Yeah, exactly. Consumer tastes again. They have a desire to prevent the Black Death. So they're going to start demanding it more. They're going to pay more. They're going to consume more. This is just a little sidebar, which I think is an important corrective. When I taught world history, I remember the Black Death is part of the Europe unit. And they always had a map that said like the Black Death came through the port in, oh gosh, which port was it? In the Black Sea.
Well, Messina and Sicily is really emphasized in the textbooks that I use.
Oh, are they really? Okay. And I remember always thinking as a young world history teacher, well, where did it come from them? And it's much more interesting and important is to say that, you know, it came as a result of the Mongols unifying Asia, right? So the Black Death, the plague, it's a Central Asian disease or Northern Indian disease. And usually it's not a big problem because it lives in rodents there. And there was so much political fracturing that that it was just hard to do a Silk Road that went clear across Asia. People usually went by boat. And so the Black Death just couldn't travel very far. But whenever things were politically united, which was when the Roman and Han dynasties were ascendant, you had the plague. And then again with the Mongols uniting Asia, you had the plague then too. The trade routes allowed the plague to just go all over the world. I'm a little scandalized now that the textbooks never said that and that you kind of don't really get that unless you dig, but it's certainly a world history and economics thing. And we should mention that, right? That whenever you have these that the plague would come and Asia would be unified because it would link up the Silk Roads. Okay, let's do scenario 4 and then we'll move on past this. Could we go to Bridget yeah, Bridget, are you there?
All right. Scenario 4.
Scenario 4.
Italian states of Ghana and Venice controlled the spice trade until the early 1500s. In 1501, Pedro Cabral, is that how you say that?
You got it.
Portugal sailed around Africa to India and brought home many spices. In 1579, English explorer Sir Francis Drake sailed through the Spice Islands and brought back shiploads of spices to England. In 1602, the Dutch East India Company took over the Spice Islands, including modern Indonesia, and began exporting spices to Europe.
Okay, so I think they're talking here about the supply chain. What do you think? Is that going to have to do with number of producers, cost of resources and technology or natural events, or is it going to have to do with the consumers? What do you think, Bridget? This is a tricky one. You want to call for help, or do you want to?
I'm thinking it could go either one, really.
Okay.
Because it definitely would change the number of producers. But then again, it could affect the consumer's taste and then the number of consumers and then an increase in the income.
Yeah, but you notice what you've done is you've identified consumers and income as an effect of the change in supply, right?
Yeah.
Once these changes happen, once the spices start flowing, then it could increase their income, but that's second. The primary effect is going to be supply. And what's going on here is they're saying there's a lot of different people who are starting to cart the stuff around. And so that's going to be a number of producers. I think that they're also pointing out that there's been a supply chain that's made. And once you build up a supply chain, it's easier to move things. What's fascinating about this is, so you notice in the 1500s, the Portuguese and English and Dutch are sailing around the world and trying to get these spices and hauling them back, but they're finding out that it's prohibitively expensive, right? You're almost certainly going to lose most of your ships. You might get a shipload of the stuff back in, and it's just not very cost effective unless you can control the entire supply chain. Now, I think for most, if it was me, I'd say, well, we can't do that. But the Dutch said, I know, in that case, we're just going to take over the entire supply chain. And so, they took over the Portuguese forts and, dotted the entire, every choke point around the entire globe, dotted it with forts, blasted the Portuguese out of the water, took over the Spice Islands, and were able to control every single geographic choke point from the Spice Islands all the way to the Netherlands. That's impressive. Of course, they did it with the power of the Dutch East India Company, which was, again, an armed mega corporation who were just given the power by shareholders to arm a bunch of new modern boats and go blasting their way through. And so it was really violent, and it only lasted a little bit. And they're finally they were able to monopolize the entire world spice trade. But not long after that, they were just bypassed by the English and others who said, well, we're going to ship around coffee and tobacco and wheat and mass consumer goods rather than just this direct little spice trade where a few ships could bring you a huge profit. So there you go. That's the big deal about spices, everybody. One boatload of them is just a massive, massive, massive fortune. But you had to monopolize the whole supply line or else it wouldn't work. And then after the English began to own the seas, they were able to ship mass consumer goods. And so that whole spice thing kind of came to a close. All right. Whew. Anything about spices? Any questions? Okay, everybody, summon the last reserves of your strength. Do not become droopy. I am so sleepy myself and desiring coffee. I did not get much sleep the last 2 nights in a row, and I'm dying here, but we're going to push through. This last lesson is entitled why do people move? And I'll show you which publication it's on. It's, if you click search by publication in virtual economics, it is under middle school world geography, focus on economics. And it's this lesson, why do people move? So let me ask you this, and this is the icebreaker it gives for the beginning. Ask students to raise their hands if they have ever moved. And they can share a personal moving story if they would like to. This one might be a little sensitive, so maybe allow people to volunteer for this one.
Share your screen.
Oh no, did I fail to share my screen? Okay, I was showing you the beginning of the lesson procedure. Sorry, but I was about to unshare my screen so I could look at you. Raise your hand if people have ever moved. There's the lesson plan right there. Why do people move? And it's on this book right here. Middle School World Geography, Focus on Economics. Sorry about that. So what are some reasons why? So if you've ever moved in the past, why did you?
Job opportunities.
Yeah. Has anyone here, if they want to say, ever moved because of a job opportunity? I have, yeah, moved a couple times. Anyone here ever moved? Was anyone here ever carried as a small child on a move? I was. Job opportunity. My parents took me from Indianapolis to West Lafayette. Any other reasons why you might have moved sometime in your life? Yes, Elizabeth.
Education, college.
Oh, yeah. Great.
This one's kind of the opposite, to kind of get away from family dynamic. So I went from Illinois to Virginia.
So let me guess, your dream vacation was not camping with your extended family for 5 days? Okay.
No. My wife is fine, but you throw in the extended family, it gets complicated. So put that distance.
And then you needed to put 800 miles in a mountain range in between you and the extended family.
Yeah, well, I was in Virginia in the Marine Corps, so I like the state, so we decided to move out here.
Yeah. Okay, so let's look over here back at the lesson. And I will share my screen this time. So we see here the reasons where people move. Students always need practice reading graphs and charts and maps. So I'm sorry the data is a little old here. I've updated a couple of the maps for you, but print stuff gets old fast. So where do most of the movements happen?
Same county.
Yeah, so what do you think's going on there? Can someone tell me a story for what's probably happening when someone moves inside the same county?
Getting a bigger house.
Yeah, bigger house.
Expanded family.
Okay, yeah. So you're staying in the same community. What's the tied for the next two?
Different county, same state, and different state.
All right, so what
Which
kind
is
of
probably the state next over.
Oh yeah.
One state over.
Maybe so. Different county, same state could be moving for college, like somebody said a minute ago. So maybe that's one of the reasons. And notice that moving from abroad, it's not nearly as common. It's 3%, which I think is to be expected, right? So where do people move? This graph on the right is a little harder to interpret, but maybe somebody can help me with that. Can somebody help me with what these two graphs mean? Let's start on the left first. Moving rates by age. Who moves the most?
Young people between 20 and, sorry, my glasses, hold on. 20 and 39, maybe.
Yeah, so I think it's probably appropriate to clump that group together. Was that Jackie said that?
Yes, that was me.
Hi, Jackie. Is that do you think that's appropriate to? I think that's probably appropriate to lump that group together, right?
Yeah, but typically those are people in their establishing families typically during that time, or getting new jobs, so that part of their lives is when they're going to have the most instability, graduating from college, getting married, maybe starting a family. So that triad right there, I would say, is probably that group.
Well, then, Jackie, riddle me this. Explain those 1 to 4-year-olds to me. They're just globe-trotting 1 to 4-year-olds. What's going on there, do you think?
They're going with their parents. So again, once they're born, they don't have any say in where we're going. But a lot of times, maybe the child is conceived, we're living in an apartment, and now we want a house. So we're bringing the kids along with us at this time, not by their choice, but by the parents' choice.
It's funny because this is exactly the story of my parents and me also. My mom and dad lived in an apartment in Indianapolis, and then they had me, and then they said, we need better opportunities. Let's go to grad school. So they moved and they carried me to West Lafayette, where I grew up. And then I got the job in the 20 to 24 range and moved to North Carolina, putting me in that biggest group. But then later, we had our first baby, and right when she was 2, I got this job here in VCU, and we moved to Virginia. And so mine fits exactly in all these things. And I expect many of you have sort of similar stories. So what's going on with this graph on the right? Migration by region, by thousands, people moving in and out. Someone interpret this to me. Who's moving where by looking at this graph?
So you take the top, so if you look at the top one where it says, like, for example, where it says people moving in. So those are the people that are going to be moving into the Northeast or to the Midwest. And then when you look at the left side, it's people moving out. So, where are they coming from? So if you look at the first row, so people from the Northeast, 71 people are moving to the Midwest, 319 are moving to the South, and 93 are moving to the West.
Where's the biggest single movement on this one?
It's going to be people from the South moving west, the 390.
Out of the South moving west. Interesting.
That was surprising.
Yeah, but let me see. I have a new map here. Here's everyone who immigrate. Oh, that's to the U.S. Here we go. Here's our top 10 flows in the U.S. 2009 to 2013. That's a little less surprising, right? A lot of people leaving California for Texas, which I think has increased even more lately, hasn't it?
Yes, they have. And the Texans are tired of them.
Here's our top 25 flows. You can actually see Gene moving out of Illinois right there and headed east. So it doesn't go all the way to Virginia. So this was a clever little map, I thought. You can find it at usimmigrationflowmapper.com.
And it looks like the Virginians are moving to North Carolina.
Yeah, what happened there? I'm a North Carolinian who moved to Virginia, so I don't know. Everyone's moving to Florida, except for Floridians who are moving to Texas. Interesting. So here are some reasons why people may move, and it kind of comes with some little stories, scenarios, but it wants you to identify both push and pull factors and costs and benefits so that it can be both a geography and an economics lesson. So your group is going to get a card, but we'll do it all together. And you're supposed to identify push factors, that's what's pushing somebody out of a place, and pull factors, what's pulling somebody into a place. Push is kind of like costs, and pull is kind of like benefits. And you can also say, put it in terms of cost or benefit. So let's start with Andre from Port-au-Prince in 2001. Juliana, would you be so kind as to read this one to us? Got to unmute though.
Okay. It is 1981. Andre and his family live in a village near Port-au-Prince. They do not believe in the policies of Haiti's government, so the government is persecuting them. Andre's family decides to go to America because they know their beliefs will be more accepted there. They have friends there who tell them work is available and Andre can attend school. Andre's family is not wealthy. They cannot travel by airplane because they do not have their government's permission to leave Haiti. They must leave most of their possessions, their friends, and many family members behind.
All right, so what's a cost of leaving for Andre?
A cost of leaving, well, there's going to be the economic cost of uprooting.
No, but bear in mind, all choices are economic choices. So you mean the money cost? There's the money cost.
The money cost, yes.
Yeah, the money cost, yeah.
Then there's the family, leaving the family and friends.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a cost. And because we're low on time, I'll say push factors would be the government's pushing them out. Pull factors would be the school and work that's available to them there. So sorry to cut this short. We have Naomi from 1884 in Russia. All these people have tragic stories, and I think that's purely so that there can be a push factor, pushing them out of the country so that you can actually have something to talk about in the geography section. So everybody, I have, before I forget, I'm not going to give it to you today, but for the end of the Institute, please make sure you do the evaluation. I have it up in the Google Classroom. You don't do it now, do it in a couple days. Just please don't forget to do it. Tomorrow, you have your asynchronous work. I've set up the Google Classroom as assignments, which means that you can upload them.